Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Board of Directors agenda meeting for January 12th. This is an opportunity for us to discuss among ourselves the agenda for our upcoming meeting a week from now on January 19th. With that said, we oftentimes have presentations at these agenda meetings, and so let me ask our City Manager, Bruce Moore, to recognize some wonderful people in our Finance Department on a variety of awards that they have received recently. Bruce?
Mayor, members of the board, we do have three exciting awards to present tonight and this afternoon. And Sarah's going to wear multiple hats because she is actually going to be the representative from the Arkansas Finance Association to do the presentation. So let me ask Sarah to come forward.
Good evening, mayors, members of the board. As Bruce just said, I'm actually the government finance officer's representative for the state of Arkansas. I serve in that capacity on our Arkansas Government Finance Officers Association, and it's with great pleasure that I'm here tonight to present some awards to the finance department staff and to you as a board. I think it's very important to remember that this board each year annually adopts a resolution that authorizes the city to have their audit performed at the maximum standards for audit purposes. The state of Arkansas requires only a regulatory-based audit, but the city goes above and beyond that and adopts a resolution to exceed those minimum standards and succumb themselves to the highest standards of financial reporting. And that would be in accordance with the Governmental Accounting Standards Board, the American Institute of Certified Public Accountants, and the United States Government Accountability Office. So the first award that I'd like to present tonight, I'm going to present to Ember Strange, who's our Assistant Finance Director. And she actually writes our comprehensive annual financial report. And this will be the 33rd year that we have achieved this award. There are over 17 reporting criteria that are evaluated. In addition to that audit that I just mentioned, there is a section in the back that gives 10-year trend history. It's really a very useful tool. It's used by a lot of the bond rating agencies. It's used by banking institutions, financial professionals, and it's really the report that consolidates the city, shows it on a government-wide basis, which would be comparable to the way that you would see a major corporation's consolidated audit. So it shows the city as a going concern as opposed to just in measurement against the annual budget. So I wanted to let you know that there are only 14 entities across the state, including the state, that receive this award. Only 8 of those are cities, and that would be Bentonville, Fayetteville, Fort Smith, Hot Springs, Jacksonville, Maumelle, Texarkana, and Little Rock. And with the exception of Fort Smith, Little Rock has received more awards than any of these other cities. So I'd like to invite Ember up to present this Certificate of Achievement for Excellence in Financial Reporting, and I'd like for her to recognize her staff here that has a lot to do with the preparation of this report.
Thank you. Thank you, Sarah. Members of the board, mayor, city manager, I'd like to just take this opportunity to say thank you to everyone that is involved in this process. Like Sarah said, I write this document. You all get a copy of this. It's a very long document. I can't take all the credit for this because I have a wonderful team that helps me get through this. Everybody in finance plays a part in this. If it's payroll, accounts payable, accounting, the grants department, purchasing, treasury management, the print shop. I'm afraid I'm going to leave somebody out, but it's everybody. So I would just like everybody from the finance department to stand up so you can see how many people it takes to get this done. Budget. I did leave someone out. I'm sorry. I knew I would. So, as you can see, it takes a lot of us to get this one book done, and I couldn't do it without them. Finance really is a team, and it takes a big effort to get these financial statements done every month and every year. So, I just want to thank them and thank you for your efforts to help us build our team.
Before Ember leaves, I wanted to let you all know that we have several members of the department that actually serve on various professional organizations, and Ember is currently serving as the secretary treasurer of the Arkansas Government Finance Officers Association. In addition, she's been selected to serve on the National Government Finance Officers Association Committee on Accounting, Auditing, and Financial Reporting. And so she meets with that group to review and develop new criteria for this comprehensive annual financial report and to evaluate pronouncements and things that are coming up before the board. So this is a high honor, and we're very proud of Ember. So. The second award that I'd like to present today is the award for the Distinguished Budget document. This is for our 2015 budget document that was prepared last year. We will again be submitting our 2016 budget document before the end of March of this year. This is the 22nd time that the city has been awarded the Distinguished Budget Award. There are 14 criteria that are involved in this award, and there are only 3 cities in this state that receive this award. Laverne Duvall has been our budget manager for many years. She's actually been with the city for 37 years, and is very knowledgeable on our budget and the criteria that go into this preparation. The budget document is really kind of known as the citizens document, where the audit report is for all of the legislative bodies and the bond issuers and all of those types of folks. The budget document is an award, or is a document that is really for the citizens. It helps to provide what the city's goals are, what our plans are, different measurements, but it's in a user-friendly, readable format instead of all of this professional jargon. And it's published, as well as the audit report, on the city's website, on the finance webpage. And so I invite anyone with an interest to go out and review this document. But it's a policy document, it's a financial plan, it's an operations guide, and it's a communications device to citizens. As I mentioned, there are 14 different criteria that go into receiving this award, and only 3 cities in the state receive this award, and that's Bentonville, Fort Smith, and Little Rock. So it's with great pleasure that I present this award to Ms. Laverne Duvall. I will say these awards have gotten a lot heavier. Once we pass 10, they have started now giving us this marble plaque, and we add buttons each year. Instead of sending plaques, our walls were covered upstairs in finance, so now this will accommodate 10 years worth of awards.
Mayor, Board of Directors, City Manager, I too would like to thank for being a part of the city team and presenting the award to the city and assisting. I'd like to thank all the staff members from the City of Little Rock, also especially the Finance Department, because without the whole department, we can't make it possible. I'd also like to say that even though there are 3 other entities that received this award, the City of Little Rock was the first for several years to receive this award. So I'm very thankful to be a part of it, and thank you very much. It's been a nice journey.
I'd like to recognize the budget analyst as well, Silas Rove. Silas, if you'd like to stand up. We've only got a two-person budget department. So, but I do want to, as Laverne mentioned, this is a document that really every department in the city has a part in. They all contribute their goals and measurements and information about each department in detail, and that's prepared really by each of the various departments of the city. And again, that document is available on the city's website, and I encourage you to go out and review it. Finally, tonight, it is with great pleasure that I recommend one of our accountants, or that I acknowledge one of our accountants. Each year at our annual Arkansas Government Finance Officers meeting, one professional from the state is selected as the Arkansas Government Finance Officer of the Year. And this year, that award went to one of the City of Little Rock's accountants, Miss Colleen Young. And Colleen, why don't you stand up and come on up here, and I'll tell you a little bit about Colleen. Colleen is one of the city's capital asset accountants, and so she tracks and reports on all of the long-term type assets the city has, including the city's infrastructure, streets, roads, bridges, police vehicles, buildings, anything that could be determined or deemed a capital asset that's owned by the city is accounted for by Colleen. And back in early 2014 or mid-2014, with all of the new resources that we had, the 2013 capital improvement bonds, the sales tax proceeds, we have a lot more capital assets being placed in service, lots of construction going on. So we brought on an additional capital asset accountant. Well, Colleen trained her peer, reviewed that work throughout the year to get her up to standards, with a new employee. Along the same time then, we had a 20-year employee who was promoted into our fleet department, and she had been handling all the bond activity for the city. And so we had a big vacancy, a big hole to fill in our department. And Colleen stepped up and performed that work, reviewed the work papers, did that in addition to her own job while training the other capital asset accountant throughout the year. And then when our new bond accountant was hired, she trained the new bond accountant. So the Government Finance Officers Association asked for recommendations, and Colleen's supervisor, Ember, sent in her name. But I think what made the big difference, aside from Colleen's accomplishments, was that she also had a peer recommend her as well. Another member of the finance department, Alan Bohannon, recommended her as well. And so the Government Finance Officers Association looked very highly on the fact that she not only had performed all of these things over and above her regular job duties, but that she had been recommended not only by a supervisor, but a peer. And so with great pride, I present the 2015 Finance Officer of the Year Award to Colleen Young.
I was not prepared for saying any words, but thank you to Sarah for presenting me with the award, and I have enjoyed my time immensely working for the City of Little Rock. It's definitely been the first work experience I've had that's been a family environment, and I really appreciate that, and wouldn't have been able to do this award without get this award without the motivation that I receive from my coworkers and my supervisors, so thank you.
Well, congratulations individually to you, Colleen, and those are 3 wonderful awards. Sarah, do you have more?
No, I was just going to say that concludes the Finance Award presentation.
All right.
So,
Well,
thank
I want
you very
to.
much.
I want you to know I get calls from department directors from the state of Arkansas who continually want to know what kind of salaries you're getting paid because they want to steal they want to steal you and some of your employees. So I'm glad you're a family because we don't need to lose you. Okay, wonderful.
Well, and
thank
with
you
that-
so much for what you do for the city.
With that said, Mayor, I do want to acknowledge the fact as well. I'm very proud of the fact that as we've had some retirements and some turnover in the department in the last few years, most of our promotions have been internal. And we've really developed a very strong staff that is able to step up and fill those positions. And I'm very proud of that. So thank you.
Okay, I guess you get to go back to work now, huh? All right. Okay, our next presentation is one that the board requested. As everyone knows, the Highway Department is working on the issue of the I-30 corridor between 630 and Interstate 40 and its impact on the city of Little Rock and North Little Rock and the entire area. And we had asked for Jim McKenzie, the Executive Director of Metroplan, to give us an update on the long-range transportation plan of Metroplan and exactly how that plays into all of the various considerations that are ongoing right now. So, Jim, thank you for being here. And let me make a suggestion to everyone on the board that I know Jim has a presentation that he's going to make, and perhaps we can wait until that presentation is over with and then ask questions, if that's okay. Okay, well, Jim, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Mayor. Members
You
of
got
the
a
city.
PowerPoint, right?
Yes,
As well?
sir.
Okay.
Members of the city board. I'm here with Casey Covington, who's operating the computer button. Casey's our transportation study director at Metroplan. And I'm here at your invitation to try to address several questions that you had about the MPO planning process and the Metropolitan Transportation Plan and policies, I think, at one of your late November board meetings. So with that, the presentation will try to cover the following topics: the Federal Highway Program and Metropolitan Planning Organizations, a brief overview of the transportation planning process for kind of from a theoretical standpoint, what Imagine Central Arkansas is, which is our regional plan relative to the 30 Crossing project, and some particular issues of a regional nature with the 30 Crossing project and some system impacts and financial constraint concerns that we have to deal with at the regional level, and then what's next from the metropolitan planning standpoint relative to what the 30 Crossing project is. I'm going to talk as fast as I can for about half an hour. Then we're here for as long as y'all want us to answer questions as time allows. If you want us to come back, we can do that, or we'll be glad to meet with you individually. So the federal government, let's start with the 1956 Interstate Highway Program, which was the first major federal intervention into state highway programs. What a lot of people don't realize is that the first federal highway program was proposed in 1955 and rejected by the Congress. It was a national toll road system, and followed the European model where interstate highways bypass major cities and connected with them by boulevard. That was rejected by Congress. A coalition of rural states and big city mayors got together, and the next year, 1956, the interstate highway system, as we know it now, was proposed. It's a freeway system, literally, and it goes through cities. So Casey, next slide. So almost immediately after the passage, state highway departments cranked up the bulldozers and started building rural highways, but also bulldozing urban neighborhoods to construct the most heavily used portions of the system, which would be in major cities. And almost immediately after that, opposition rose in many cities, and lots of projects were mired in long and expensive legal battles. Some projects were killed. As a matter of fact, 71 major freeway projects or segments were killed in the process. Many others faced costly legal delays. So as a result of a major federal program being mired in court with the expenses going up and a lot of political pushback going on, the federal highway, the federal Congress did a couple of things. Next slide, Casey. Some of, but not all of, the notable freeway battles. One of the first was the Embarcadero Freeway in San Francisco that was to connect the Oakland Bay Bridge with the Golden Gate Bridge along the waterfront. It was stopped. The top two slides you can see where the freeway dead end and an exit went into the city. In 1989, the Loma Prieta earthquake damaged not only the Bay Bridge, but the Embarcadero Freeway and the Central Freeway in San Francisco. And in 1990, after a lot of civic debate, the Board of Supervisors, a very close vote, voted to tear down the Embarcadero Freeway. The 90,000 cars a day that were being handled on that freeway and the Central Freeway, which was also taken down, were channeled onto a couple of boulevards, and the Embarcadero redevelopment is one of the most successful redevelopment projects. And for those who advocate tearing down urban freeways, and that debate's gone on in a lot of the country, the Embarcadero experience is one of the poster childs. Next slide. Also early on, probably the most powerful man in New York State, Robert Moses, was stopped in building the Lower Manhattan Expressway by a self-styled citizen planner named James Jacobs, who famously wrote Death and Life of Great American Cities. And instead of going through the Greenwich Village and Soho neighborhoods and destroying those, that project was killed. Next. Closer to home, I-40 dead-ended at Overton Park, and the Friends of Overton Park filed a lawsuit, went all the way up to the Supreme Court of the United States, and the Supreme Court upheld the opponents, and so I-40 does not go through Memphis. But also they wrote new law that gave special status to public parkland. And the 30 Crossing project involves some public parkland, albeit a de minimis amount, but still those additional processes have to be gone through. Next. Some of you went with us when we took a couple of board trips to Portland, Oregon, and remember the story about the Mount Hood Expressway. A civic activist named Neil Goldsmith organized the neighborhoods along the proposed Mount Hood Freeway, fought the freeway to a standstill, and much of the planned freeway system in Portland was ultimately abandoned. Most notably, we're left with the ramp to nowhere, which goes off of I-5 and would have gone to the Mount Hood Freeway. They replaced that with the Max Light Rail line and have continued to use light rail to deal with some of the transportation congestion issues ever since. Mr. Goldschmidt went on to be Mayor of Portland, Governor of Oregon, I believe, and Secretary of Transportation under President Carter. Next. And lastly, and most close to home, was our own Wilbur Mills Freeway in 1975, of course. Acorn filed suit, blocked the freeway for 4 years. It ultimately was approved with some conditions, but at an additional cost of $22 million, which at the time was a significant sum of money. Doesn't buy much these days, but at the time was pretty expensive. So as a result of all of these legal challenges and pushback in major cities, the Congress passed the National Environmental Policy Act in 1970, establishing strict procedures for determining social, economic, and environmental impacts of major road projects, and that process is being done now. But they also established metropolitan planning organizations. MPOs, each metropolitan statistical area in the country has to have a designated metropolitan planning organization, and Metroplan was designated as the MPO for this region by Governor Dale Bumpers in the early 70s. The MPO is composed of local elected officials, the State Department of Transportation, transit operators, and it is contractually obligated under federal law and regulation to establish and operate the 3C planning process. The 3 C's stand for cooperative, continuous, and comprehensive. We are required by law to develop a 20-year long-range transportation plan that deals with the expenditure of federal surface transportation dollars in the metropolitan area, and a 4-year construction plan called the Transportation Improvement Program, where we take projects on that long-range plan and bring them down for construction. Both the long-range transportation plan and the 4-year construction plan have got to be financially constrained by year of expenditure, which means they're not wish lists. We have to be reasonably assured that there's money available. We need to know the source of the money. We need to know the year that the money is going to be expended over that 20-year period, which is no easy task. What the 3C planning process does and the MPO process does, it gives local officials an equal say in major road projects that are going through their communities and affecting their communities. And the term cooperative means exactly that. Everybody's had the state DOT and all the local governments involved, and the Federal Highway Administration need to be nodding up and down that, yes, this is what we want, and we all agree to it. And so that's what the MPO process is. A project cannot move forward in a metropolitan area using federal transportation funds if it's not on the 20-year long-range transportation plan and on the transportation improvement program. Next slide, Casey. So let me talk a little bit about transportation theory in an overview, and I'm going to steal a presentation by an engineer, Walter Kulash, who's one of the rock stars in transportation planning, at least in terms of urban planning perspective. We brought Walter to town for a best practices seminar about a decade ago. This is some of the information he shared with us then, but the slides come from his keynote address at the first annual Sustainable Transportation Conference in 2014. One of the first slides, he quotes another rock star in the transportation engineering world, Dr. Thomas Larson. Dr. Larson was a civil engineering professor teaching transportation engineering at Penn State University. He founded the Pennsylvania Transportation Institute, was secretary of the Pennsylvania Department of Transportation, and appointed by President George H.W. Bush to head the Federal Highway Administration. Dr. Larson wrote, in conjunction with Senator Daniel Patrick Moynihan, the first post-interstate federal transportation bill, the Intermodal Surface Transportation Efficiency Act of 1991. His wisdom, quoted by Mr. Kulash, was highway design is too important to be left to highway engineers. And by that, I assume he means that community input and other community values need to have the primary role, not just the engineering perspective. Next slide, Casey. So there are two philosophies really on dealing with transportation congestion. The first philosophy is to build your way out of congestion. If you get congested, widen the road. And frankly, this is the dominant philosophy in transportation planning. The other philosophy is to accept congestion and manage the system, manage the congestion so that it balances out. Next slide. So I think one of Newton's, I think it's his third law of motion: for every action there's an equal and opposite reaction. And so you see that in which of these two philosophies that you choose to pursue. If you widen a road, the first order impacts are you reduce delay and you reduce cost. Yay, these are good things. If you accept congestion, the first order impacts are you increase delay and you increase cost. But just like ripples in a pond, when you drop a rock into it, there are second, third, and fourth order impacts. So if you widen a road, the second order impacts are that we're going to reduce delay. Therefore, it's possible for some of our citizens to get a bigger home, move further out, maybe get their kids in a better school district, so they move their household location. And we can range further, so we can go farther for shopping. We can, instead of going to Craftco from my house, I can afford to go out to Home Depot on Chenal Parkway because the transportation is easier. We reduce costs, therefore we drive more. It costs us less, we can get more of it. We drive more and we own more cars because now we've moved our household into neighborhoods that don't have sidewalks, that are single use instead of mixed use, and require an automobile for nearly every trip. We get to the third order of impacts. Businesses follow rooftops. So enough rooftops move out, then businesses follow them. When businesses go out, jobs go out. On the fourth order, tax base also goes out. Because we can range further, our market area is larger. So stores operating on low margin, high volume can have a larger market area to attract more customers. So you get mega box stores with large surface parking lots, more strip development along major roadways because more people are driving. More strip development you get, the more that steals capacity through carrying capacity from the roadway. We're driving more, so we need more lane miles. We own more cars. There's new roadway construction, and pretty soon we're in a congested state. So we get caught in a do loop, and we come back up, and we widen the road again. Especially if you're in a central city, this would be called a vicious cycle. Economists would call it that. On the other hand, if you accept congestion, we know the first order impacts. The second order impacts are maybe it's not as easy for me to move out and drive into my job. So instead of moving out, some of us will decide to stay put and improve our home. Maybe we add a wing or a bedroom on, or we remodel the kitchen. We may use alternative modes if congestion is too much. The costs increase, we do less of it, so we drive less, and we have to own fewer cars because we're still in a compact mixed-use urban environment. On the third order impacts, because as many households aren't moving out, then some businesses get to stay closer into those rooftops that stay in some of our older neighborhoods. Jobs then stay in, tax base stays in. We get more of an emphasis on downtown, on Main Street, on neighborhood commercial, and less on auto-dependent strip commercial. There's less vehicle miles traveled, which means there's less pollution going out of tailpipes, fewer greenhouse gases being emitted, more money for community reinvestment because we own fewer cars. An average new car in the United States costs $8,000 to $10,000 in after-tax income. That's a lot of disposable income that could be spent on a larger mortgage, remodeling your home, saving to send your kid to college. Again, if you're a central city, an economist would call this a virtuous cycle. Next. So the standard theory about traffic planning is this. Folks like traffic engineers like Casey take the population and job and growth trends of the past. They project them into the future. We've got thousands of traffic analysis zones that our model projects into. It shows that we're going to run out of road capacity in certain corridors over the next 20 years. So we widen that corridor, and we should have more than enough capacity for that 20-year projection. In reality, what happens is something called induced traffic. Now, there are a couple of laws of transportation that I want to share with you. One is that most people choose to drive when it's most congested because it is most convenient to them, okay? Most people choose to drive when it's most congested because it's most convenient to them. The second law is called the law of triple convergence. Of those who choose not to drive when it's most congested, they either change the time of their travel, a little earlier, a little later, they take an alternative route rather than their preferred route, or they may take an alternative mode. But if we then add capacity to that preferred corridor, then all three of those folks triple converge back on the preferred corridor at the most congested time. And so not only because of the second and third order impacts, but also because of the law of triple convergence, we get significant induced demand, which exceeds our projections. Therefore, we get congestion sooner than we wanted to. And we get into that do loop that I talked about, where you continually widen road until you've in fact run out of right of way, or you just hit political opposition that's so strong that won't let you widen the road again. The road size and not congestion is the choice. One of the slides that Mr. Kulash had in here that I didn't include was a pithy little saying that widening a road to eliminate congestion is like loosening your belt to eliminate obesity. So it's a continually recurring situation that you can temporarily build your way out of, but that gets to be increasingly expensive. Okay, Casey, next one. So the build your way out of congestion alternative is a vertical approach. You're focusing on moving cars, you're building more pavement, you're building more lanes, you're building more roads. At a certain point, you've got to start actively managing the system and doing system management, trying to do some demand management, some intelligent transportation system, or you can take a lateral approach and you can try to manage congestion and not solve it. And one of the first things you do is you make a choice about how big a road that you're going to build. You don't just respond to demand, you make a conscious choice on what you want your community to be like and how big a road it is. And you also change standards. For example, in the 30 Crossing project, The State Highway Department's standard for level of service is a level of service D. So in 2041, the design year for the project, in the most congested 15 minutes of the day, you will be able to drive 55 miles an hour or faster in this corridor, okay? Now, in the other 23 and a half hours of the day, you'll have a lot of excess capacity that's been built and is underutilized. So one of the ways you manage things is you adjust your standard to say it's not unreasonable in the peak period to have some level of service F. You're probably going to get to that pretty soon anyway, but that's how we manage things. Okay, next. We also focus on moving fewer people, fewer miles. We build more density, more mixed use. We build a network, connected network of roadways that allow people multiple options and it's like the magic of the grid and being able to disperse traffic as opposed to concentrating traffic all on a few major roadways. Next one, Casey. We try to improve the quality of travel. Instead of building one-way, high-speed, high-volume roadways through our central business district, maybe we go back to two-way streets with on-street parking. They're more business-friendly, they're more pedestrian-friendly, they calm traffic, they build more of a sense of place. And finally, because we've done all that, then we can move people and not cars. And we focus then on the alternative modes, walking, transit, and cycling. Now, somebody asked about the Imagine Central Arkansas policy. And in Metro 2020, the first regional plan that we did after ICE-T passed in 1991, the Metro Plan Board adopted a policy that's become known as the 6-lane cap. But what it said was, and I'll show you in detail what it said. What it said was this: all of this, not one or the other, all of this. It recommended building our metropolitan freeway system to 6 through lanes, including building the North Belt Freeway, to 6 through lanes, and most of it was 4 lanes at the time. We're nearly there. It's about a $2 billion, not counting the North Belt, about a $2 billion freeway construction program. Then it recommended building out a robust regional arterial network, a 750-mile network of regional arterials, major road construction network, and then to deal with demand above that with regional transit. Once you had those 3 legs of the 3-legged stool in place, then go back and revisit the need for widening the freeways beyond that. So that was the recommendation made in Metro 2020. It has been continued as a metropolitan transportation policy all the way through Imagine Central Arkansas. So let me deal a little bit with what Imagine Central Arkansas is. It is our latest regional plan. Unlike the Metro title plans before it, it's not just a transportation plan. Director Wyrick, I think you asked if this was a real plan or an aspirational plan, and the answer is yes. It's both of those, and I'll explain how in just a second. Next, Casey. Instead of dealing with just transportation, it goes back to what MetroPlan was formed to do in the first place: develop a comprehensive development plan for our metropolitan area. So we do have transportation as part of it. We also deal with land use and housing, health and safe communities, economic growth and vitality, environmental quality, and sustainable energy, all within the discipline of funding adequacy for doing all of this sort of stuff. And the assumptions made in one piece of this puzzle run throughout all of the other pieces, and so they're all tied together and self-reinforcing. Next one, Casey. As it pertains to transportation, this is kind of the process that we used. First, we went out to the community and asked the community what they wanted to be, hence the Imagine title. There's nothing as strong as the human imagination. Imagine what this region should be in 2040. We made particular efforts to go out to the Black community, the Hispanic community, the disabled community, and young people, because they're who we're doing this plan for. So we did that, and our Regional Plan Advisory Council developed a vision from that. We drew transportation projects. We then winnowed that down based on available resources and took the affordable part of it and put it in our federally required, financially constrained 20-year long-range metropolitan transportation plan. The unfunded part are in our vision plan, what we hope to build out a balanced transportation system into. We prioritize those, and then elected officials and other agencies will go back to the public, much as Rock Region Metro is with the transit element, that they're going to ask for the public for additional resources to begin implementing. So let me talk a little bit about the balance between what the aspiration is in transportation and what the available funding is. Between 2014 and 2040, new road widenings, road maintenance and repair, bike ped improvements, transit improvements, and transit operations, $19.5 billion. All of these state, local, and federal resources identified at that time totaled $6 billion for this metropolitan area. And that doesn't cover 3/4 of the cost of just maintaining the roads that are on the ground today. So you can see that there's a significant funding shortfall in transportation that's been reinforced by the Blue Ribbon Committee on Highway Finance that I served on and the Governor's Working Group. The same applies statewide and nationally about funding shortfalls for transportation. But it is within the available $6 billion that we have to craft a 20-year financially constrained transportation plan. Next one, Casey. The public outreach, which is also required by federal regulation, but we believe is the basis for any sound vision and plan, we're very proud of. You can go on the Imagine Central Arkansas website. These are just samples of one of the public outreach tools that we used. People put on whiteboard what they imagine. There are some wonderful and telling and profound comments from kids and old people and everybody in the community. So I would urge you, if you have time, to go on and look at those. But it is from that public outreach that we based the goals of the plan. Next one, Casey. So how does Imagine Central Arkansas relate to the 30 Crossing project? In the first place, there's a roadway policy that the board adopted after Metro 2020, and it's on the next slide. We'll go over it in detail. That requires a variance or amendment. That has to happen first. Then we need to amend the long-range transportation plan. The 30 Crossing project is on there, but only for $300 million and only for bridge replacement and operational improvements, i.e. replacing what's there now at an improved standard. And then we have to amend the transportation improvement program. All of those require us to go through a formal process and to seek formal public comment. And we've been working with the Highway Department as we've been going through this process to try to schedule our process with theirs so that there's no undue delay in getting to a resolution of the project status based on what we have to do based on our federal requirements. So here's the process that has been called the 6-lane cap. Metropolitan freeway system should be built to 6 through lanes. That's an affirmative statement to widen the freeways. It's a freight policy, it's a safety policy, it's a regional mobility policy, and it's a significant construction advocacy for roadway construction. But it is the board's intent that demand over that capacity be met with a robust regional arterial network and public transit. Part of this is budgetary. Building freeways is expensive. If all you do is get caught in the do loop of never-ending widening of the freeways, then there's no money to be spent on building a regional arterial network, 70% of which are state highways, and with dealing with regional public transit. Now, it's not an absolute cap. It says this is what our intent is, but if the Highway Department sees the need to widen any segment of the metropolitan freeways beyond 6 lanes, it needs to get concurrence from the Metro Plan Board. It needs to do a thorough analysis of the impact of widening the lanes and what alternatives are. That has been done and is being done through the planning and environmental leakages process and the NEPA process that the department is going through with Federal Highway Administration right now. And the next part of that, a thorough analysis of the impact of the induced traffic demand on local roadway systems that's going to have to receive that traffic. Those are the local issues that the Highway Department is working very closely with each of you, with the City of North Little Rock, with Judge Hyde on, and trying to deal with the impacts of those local issues. I want to make it clear that it is important to the Metro Plan Board that whatever is ultimately proposed is acceptable to the local governments. It's acceptable to the local governments, and that everybody's head is nodding up and down at the same time before this project moves forward. Okay, Casey. Now, there are, separate from that, some regional issues that we have concerns about, and it has to do with our requirements under federal law and regulation, mainly for the 20-year financially constrained plan. We're concerned about the impact of adding capacity to one link of a freeway system. It's not just this link that's congested. The entire freeway network in the metropolitan area works as a system, and it seeks equilibrium within itself. So people make decisions about where and which way to go to work, when to leave to go to work, and things like that based on the equilibrium in the system. So if you add significant capacity to one link, then what does that do to the other links in the system? And we've been saying all along that we were concerned about that because that has system repercussions that we've got to deal with in the 20-year plan. So we have done a systems analysis. Casey's going to give us a little bit of just a touch of what that system analysis concluded, and then I'll conclude by talking about some of the financial constraint considerations that we're going to have to work through. Casey?
Thank you, Jim. Before I get into the presentation, and John, you can advance, I want to make a mention that there's a lot of information in the report itself that I'm not going to be able to go over as part of today's presentation. So if you have questions about the report, Jim and I will be available whenever you ask to answer questions about that report. Okay, John? This is the limits of the CAO 602 project. This is the focus that HCD has done through their Pell process of looking at the corridor. As Jim said, as part of our responsibilities of an MPO, we have to look at the system impacts, and therefore we have done the system impacts to look at this project's impact on the remaining segments of freeway. And the one thing I want you to take from today is that this is the centerpiece of the freeway system in central Arkansas, and it has impacts on other freeway facilities. Okay, John? This is a couple of associated widening projects. When HCD did their simulation and operational model, they found that traffic could not effectively enter and exit the corridor. It was backing up into the corridor due to capacity issues outside the corridor. So they had to assume some widenings to avoid that occurring. This occurred on I-30 to 65th Street, so there was an assumed fourth lane on I-30. On I-630 in the westbound direction, there's an additional lane that continues to Louisiana where the model currently ends. And then also in North Little Rock for lane balancing, there's some additional lanes on I-40, and there's some long-term capacity issues. For your benefit, HCD has committed to doing studies on these two corridors. On I-30, there's an ongoing study looking at improvements from Benton to downtown Little Rock. And then on I-630, there is a corridor study that's planned for the next few years to look at I-630 from University to downtown. Thanks, John. When we did the systems analysis, we wanted to look at operations, not just within that corridor, but at a systems level. So this is the results of that analysis. We're going to discuss 5 alternatives today. The 2010 was just a comparison scenario that we did. We did 2040 without the project. 2040 with the project is 8 lanes, 10 lanes. And then a final scenario, if you take the assumption that you're not going to accept congestion, what would it take to get operations back to current levels? So we'll show you what that would require. From a VMT standpoint, we looked at 4 statistics, VMT being the first one. Traffic growth grows from about 9 million to 12 million region-wide on the freeway system. That's just due to population growth, and then you get some additional VMT growth as you complete some of these projects and you get diversion and additional trip making. From a daily delay standpoint, you go from about 8 minutes to 10 minutes between 2010 and 2040, so about a 20% increase. For average speed, you're going to lose about 4 miles an hour. Our models do the best job at quantifying the differences between alternatives. You get a small improvement as you go to the 10-lane scenario. And then to get back to the full level, you have to take that final scenario. Okay, John? And let's go one more. So to summarize the regional mobility impacts, the widening of I-30 does little to improve system performance, that being travel time and average speed, that's less than a mile an hour. Now, that doesn't mean that the corridor doesn't have improvements within it, but within a system standpoint, it's pretty small. And if you're going to improve system performance, you're going to have to look at a comprehensive approach to transportation, and you're going to have to find new funding, as Jim mentioned as part of his presentation. John? This is the map that shows what I feel would be required if you wanted to get back to a current level of service. And you can see within Little Rock, that means you would widen 630, all of 430, all of I-30. This doesn't come at no cost, John. That's $2.5 to $3 billion if you build that today. And John, if you go in the future, that's $4 billion plus dollars once you include inflationary factors. Plus, that doesn't include local roadway and maintenance costs that would also be associated with this scenario. And the last thing I'll say about this scenario is that while this gets you back to the level that you see today in terms of congestion and slightly better, it still does not meet HCD's level of service D standard. If you go all the way to level of service D, you're talking about a few more lanes here, 2 to 4 on each of these segments. So once we did the systems analysis, we also wanted to look at the network impacts at a network standpoint. So we wanted to look at a link level and see what that congestion was. There are several maps in the report. I'm going to give you the opportunity to go to the report and look at that. We're not going to go in those in detail today, but they show the congestion with different scenarios. John, if you can go forward 2 more. We'll look at what the results of that network analysis was. Number one is that the project does not eliminate congestion. It does have benefits within the corridor, but it moves that congestion to points that are outside the corridor. The hip bone's connected to the neck bone. Your bottlenecks are going to occur immediately outside the I-30 corridor if you don't see additional widenings. And those impacts are going to vary with the alternative. The more capacity you build in the central corridor, the faster it's going to exit the central corridor and reach those bottlenecks and make those worse. So that is a quick review of the systems analysis. Again, I'll be happy to visit with you if you have questions on that. And I'll turn it back over to Jim.
Okay, so what's next from the MPO standpoint? Now, the Highway Department and Federal Highway are proceeding through the NEPA process, analyzing both an 8-lane general purpose lane and the 10-lane CD, and will end up coming out of that with a draft environmental assessment. From our standpoint, what's next is the ask. We have not been formally asked by the Highway Department to amend the policy, the plan, or the TIP. We anticipate that we actually have been anticipating that for a couple of months now, and we've been working closely with their staff on how to draft it so that we can get the kind of information that we need, but we haven't gotten it yet. As soon as we get it, we'll start our formal processes in line. If we follow our normal processes, and I would strongly suggest that we do, then we would refer it to our Regional Plan Advisory Council, on which you guys have several appointees. We just had an orientation session for some new appointments today who will do the analysis and seek public comment. Then, because we need some of the data from the draft EIS, especially for the physical constraint section of the plan amendment, we may have to wait until we get the draft EA before we can do that. Then the RPAC will make a recommendation to the Metro Plan Board. The board may wish to take additional public comment or not. It's up to them. And then they will take action on on request to amend the policy, the plan, and the TIP. Next one. We will probably take them through a decision tree, something like this, both the RPAC and the board. Do you want to, and let me emphasize, both of these are legitimate public policy choices. They each have different costs and different repercussions, but they are both legitimate public policy choices. Do you want to choose build our way out of congestion, in which case you simply repeal the 6-lane cap? Now we're going to have to rewrite all the rest of those other linked plan elements as a result of that, because the adopted plan is based on option B, accept congestion in the corridor and manage the system. If that's the route that you choose, then the next question follows. Is the I-30 corridor, like the western half of I-630, unique enough to warrant an exception to the 6-lane cap? Because an exception was made to widen 630 westbound to University to absorb all the merges coming off of the rebuilt Big Rock interchange. The board made an exception to that policy. If the answer is no, then the RPAC will recommend, the board may or may not accept any recommendation they make, but would recommend upgrading building an upgraded 6-lane, replacing the bridge, and be done with it. If the answer is yes, then is 8 lanes needed or is 10 lanes needed? We need the information then from the draft EA to do that. But the other question that we have to deal with on a regional basis is, what's the impact then on the remainder of the freeway systems on these assumed additional widenings necessary to make this project work, and then on other links as the row of dominoes keeps falling around the metropolitan freeway system. Next one, Casey. And then finally, and this is the big unknown right now, it's something that we have to work through with the department, is we have to, in terms of fiscal constraint, we have to balance the plan. It's kind of a zero-sum game with that 20-year plan. We know the budget for the project. The budget is $600 million. 100 or 150 million of that's going to be borrowed money that's got to be paid back by future revenues. So then we have to, in our 20-year plan, deal with the ripple costs. We have to deal with the payback. For every dollar paid back on the project, it's $1 not being able to spend on another project in Central Arkansas. We have an unknown amount of money needed to complete the project. If $600 million will complete the project, I'll be surprised. And so whatever that amount and that's complicated because this is a design build project, the first one in Arkansas. Nobody's ever done that before. And so we may not know for a while what that figure is, but that's got to be somehow dealt with in our plan. I don't know how we're going to do that yet. We're working closely with the Federal Highway Administration to get some guidance on that. They've never done one of these projects in Arkansas before. And then the unknown number of dollars needed to build those necessary assumed widenings within that 20-year period. And for every dollar spent on those, it's another dollar that a project is not going to get built in Central Arkansas in that 20-year plan. So we will need to know, for our financial constraint portion, where's the money coming from by year of expenditure, by which federal pot it's coming out of, and what isn't going to be built in Central Arkansas as a result of that in each of those categories before we can balance the financial portion of our long-range plan as required by federal law and regulation. So there's a lot of work still to be done. It's the largest single project ever attempted by the State Highway Department in Arkansas. It is in one of the most complex corridors in the state of Arkansas, and if it would have been easy and cheap, somebody would have done it already. We're trying new methods and new approaches, and so it is literally a work in progress. Some of the local issues that you guys are still working through, we're still working through some of those regional issues, but everybody's working hard. I think everybody wants to see a successful project that's acceptable to both the cities that meet the state mobility needs, your needs for for building strong communities, and that we can all can afford. So that, in a nutshell, is as fast as I could talk and cover a broad range of topics. And we're here, be glad to answer any questions you might have for as long as time will allow, Mr. Mayor.
All right, thank you very much, Jim. Thank you. That's quite an extensive presentation, and there's a lot of issues there. So let me offer now to any of the board members an opportunity to follow up on any questions that they might have for you. First up is Director Doris Wright. Go ahead, Doris.
Thank you, Mr. McKizzy, for your report. I was struck during your report that it seems that even if this $600 million is spent, we still have not solved the problem. So why not just repair the bridge and do improvements and manage the system?
That's going to be the $24,000 question.
Have you been approached or asked about that?
I'm in staff support to policymakers.
Okay.
And what we try to do is present policymakers with the most complete and best information that we can and let them make the decision. I think it's apparent from our systems analysis that just improving this project is not going to eliminate congestion in the metropolitan area. We'll move the congestion out of this corridor quicker to someplace else on the system, and could actually back up into the corridor, defeating the purpose of congestion relief unless additional widenings take place. And for additional widenings to take place, then there are consequences of that, not the least of which is additional funding to do that. And so all of that, the knee bones connected to the hip bone, all of those things need to fit together in a way that work as a whole.
So if you're saying this to us, so this is in your plan. The highway department has your plan. Are they not required to take all that into consideration before they decide to do this project?
Well, I think they have looked at it and believe that the roadway still needs to be widened. At least that's the impression I get. And that's a question you should address to Mr. Bennett, I guess.
But we're required by law to have this plan, your plan.
Yes, ma'am.
So if they're not going to follow it, why are we required by law to have it? Maybe that's a redundant question. I don't know. But I thought I might need to put it out there.
Again, a question that I would refer to Mr. Bennett.
Okay. Thank you.
Jim, you might mention how many different governmental or municipal jurisdictions are a part of MetroPlan as it relates to this issue of a system-wide metropolitan area. We're not talking about just metropolitan Little Rock. If you just explain that so that the board has an understanding that from an MPO process, you're not dealing just with Little Rock and North Little Rock.
Right. As I mentioned earlier, every metropolitan statistical area is required to have a metropolitan planning organization. In this case, we have a 6-county metropolitan statistical area. We're required to do a long-range transportation plan for that area that is defined as urbanized, a certain density requirement per square mile in the latest decennial census, and that which we expect to be urbanized in the next 20 years. So that area covers all of Pulaski County, Saline County, expanded to cover all of Faulkner County and about the northern half of Lonoke County. And so that's the area for which we are required to do a transportation plan. Our board of directors, we have 4 county judges, I think 26 or 27 mayors now. The State Highway Department is on our board of directors, a representative from Rock Region Metro. In addition, we have advisory committees, both technical and citizen advisory committees that provide advice to the board.
Thank you. Director Hendricks, you're next, please.
Thank you. My question is, and it sort of piggybacks on what Director Wright has asked, those 3 counties that you just mentioned, would they be responsible for bearing that $600 million?
No, that's the $600 million And I haven't seen the latest budget numbers, but it's 400 and, help me, Ben, what's the 600 billion?
What's the breakdown?
Yeah,
It's around 400 million cap, around 22 million IRP, around 100 million in the, about another 90 million in bridge federal funds, and another 10 million in.
okay. So we've got a mix of federal funds. The most of it's coming from the Connect Arkansas program, which is that 10-year half-cent sales tax that we passed. Some of it, the portion of I-40 in North Little Rock will be repaired, reconstructed with interstate reconstruction bond money. There'll be some money that was previously dedicated for bridges has now been merged into another federal funding pot that'll be used on the bridge replacement. And then some significant amount of that will be financed by the design, build, finance contractor that will need to be repaid from future state and federal revenues.
So you're saying that Little Rock will not be responsible for 600 million. It's coming from other entities. Is that what I'm understanding you to say?
That's correct. Now, what Little Rock may be responsible for are any improvements outside the highway department right away that will be necessitated by the interchange designs.
And I wanted to comment on you mentioned about the congested area within this main part. I think you're talking about downtown, the congestion of the traffic. The traffic is only, ingress, egress, when the people that are coming in from other areas of this state to work. So I have a problem with that we would just want to spend that kind of money for 6 lanes when these people are only in here and out of here. They don't live here. So I really can't see that. I don't know. It's interesting what you're saying, but I'm just not buying it.
Let me say that the interstate system connects our metropolitan economy, all folks in all 4 counties, with the national economy and the internet and the global economy. And to that extent, it is important. It's an important conduit of freight, not only across the country, but to and from this metropolitan area. So it's important that that not be ignored, and that we also understand that just the city of Little Rock is not the metropolitan economy. We have employees and customers in all 4 counties of the metropolitan area, and it's an integrated metropolitan economy that we need to figure out a transportation system, in our opinion, a balanced transportation system that will support intra-regional travel as well as inter-regional or interstate travel.
Okay, my last statement, Mayor, is that you mentioned about the tax that was passed. You were referring to Little Rock?
No, ma'am, it's the half-cent statewide sales tax.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Director Wyrick, you're recognized, please.
Thank you, Mayor. So in your presentation, I came away with a lot of questions and how things are going to be financed, and I'm very shocked at the additional 6 to 8 lanes that are needed on I-30, I-630, and North Little Rock. I don't think we discussed that in the presentation from the Highway Department, so that's kind of shocking to me. And ever since we started talking about this, I don't know if it's my imagination or not, but coming in from Southwest Little Rock, I don't know what the rating on the freeway is, but there are many times during the day when it's just stopped. It could be the outlet mall. I don't know. Maybe that's generated a lot of traffic. But it does seem to me that there's more traffic on Interstate 30 coming from southwest than what I noticed before this discussion came along. In your chart, you talked about building the plan or managing the system. And managing the system, exactly what do you see that, how do you manage the system? Do you have a crystal ball? Do you have a plan on how you manage the system as opposed to building the 6, 8, 10, 12 lanes?
If I had a crystal ball, I'd have the winning Powerball ticket in my back pocket.
I know
right
it,
now.
and you tell me what it was, and we could share.
The Let me use an analogy, if I can, about this particular corridor. I had a old 1922 house in Hillcrest that had corrugated steel pipes, and I was on a business trip. I got a call from my wife and said, "We're watering the whole neighborhood right now." The water line had
Good job.
burst. So we got a new water line, and as soon as we got water pressure to the house, all of the faucets and everything started exploding because they were designed to handle that trickle of water and not the surge of real water pressure. So I had to replumb the entire house. This section of roadway is like a regulator valve. It is unique in that within a 6-mile stretch, there are 6 major freeway-to-freeway interchanges, lots of merges and weaves that need to be dealt with. But it also regulates traffic in and out of the downtowns to the other parts of the system. Now, if we expand that main water line, expand the capacity, it pushes traffic out to the other links, and the PM peak pushes traffic onto your system in the AM peak in great huge lumps. It doesn't meter the congestion so that the rest of the system can handle it. So we can improve this link. It doesn't eliminate congestion, puts it onto your system in the morning, onto the other links in the afternoon, and just moves it someplace else. Only if we replumb the whole system will we be able to maintain the same level of mobility that we currently enjoy today. So there's going to be congestion someplace unless we come up with a lot more money. The question is, how do you balance that and keep it in equilibrium? I think you could do some significant improvements in the corridor even without additional widenings, some identified in the initial planning process, dealing with redesigning the North Terminal interchange and with the 67 interchange to deal with some of those significant traffic weaves there. Certainly, if you rebuilt the corridor to 6 lanes, it'd look like a lot like an 8-lane freeway. The bridge would be 8 lanes. There'd be a lot of additional lanes going from interchange to interchange. You'd probably relocate the interchanges and eliminate some of the interchanges just like you would now. So you deal with some of the safety issues. That way there'd still be some volume-related congestion, there's no doubt about that, if you didn't do any additional capacity. But there's a lot that you could do to improve the operations of the freeway.
So if we're talking about choking down 30 and 630 in North Little Rock, doesn't that speak to the fact that more of the traffic is local traffic than it is pass-through traffic, which is what some people have talked about tonight? That, I mean, it just sounds like to me that we're talking about local Little Rock, North Little Rock traffic trying to get to work is what we're talking about, as opposed to thousands and thousands of people passing through the city to get to another destination out of our area.
I think in one of Mr. Holder's presentations, he said to you that about 80% of the traffic is intra-regional, only 20% of the traffic goes all the way through the corridor.
What I remember.
So most of the traffic is coming from within the region. Now, a lot of strictly Little Rock and North Little Rock traffic use the Broadway and Main Street bridges, and so you get more regional traffic, in particular from the northeast corridor, from North Little Rock, Jacksonville, Cabot, and points north, coming to work either in downtown Little Rock or North Little Rock, or out the 630 corridor to some of the eastern medical establishments that are job centers along the corridor. That's correct.
Okay, and I asked them when we had our meeting at the Clinton Library about the 440, expanding it, that freeway, and then they said that there was not land to build a freeway on, any additional freeway.
The freeway's not on land. It's substantially on structure. It would be difficult. It would be expensive. It's all a substantial part of it. It's like building a freeway in Louisiana. It's all on bridges.
Without the alligators,
it's possible, but it's expensive, and there are environmental issues to be dealt with. But the 440 connection is the major truck through route from that god-awful truck parking lot between here and Memphis on I-40 and I-30 down into Texas and Mexico.
Okay, and then also I asked about the South Loop, and that's been earmarked on property for a number of years. And what they said that was they considered that to be a local construction project as opposed to anything that they would build.
Yeah, and I think that's an unfortunate conclusion. One of the things that the consultant is finding, looking at the just widened I-30, it's only been 10 years since it was widened to 6 lanes, congested again, is that, and it's something that we pointed out, and one of the reasons that we want to build a robust regional arterial network is that there's no other alternative to get from Saline County. 60% of the workforce works in Pulaski County, except to force people onto I-30 to compete with interstate traffic. If you had the South Loop and had the money to build the north-south arterials to connect to it, then you could give people in Saline County alternative other than I-30 to get to work in Pulaski County. Now, in my opinion, the South Loop is more appropriately a state route because of its potential traffic relief on I-30. And so what I have suggested to the Highway Department, and I think, Mayor, I mentioned it to you a couple of times, is that the city of Little Rock may want to consider swapping some mileage with the Highway Department for them taking the South Loop onto the state system. For example, Broadway is the state highway. Cantrell Road is a state highway. Asher Avenue is a state highway. Baseline Road, that's been significantly improved, is a state highway. Perhaps it may be possible to swap mileage, take it over for the city of Little Rock maintenance, and talk the state into taking the South Loop onto the state system, where I believe it's much more appropriately located.
So I didn't know you could swap streets for streets. That's interesting.
Yep.
So who makes that proposal? How does that come about? Because I really was told that they consider that to be a local city project. Now, I'm with you. I think there'd be the most benefit to do something like that.
They do. The state has a history of swapping miles with local governments, usually is on the local government initiative to do that. They've got the 10th largest state highway system in the country and can't afford the mileage that they have, so they're not in the business of taking more mileage on. But I have been willing in the past to swap miles, and when I mentioned that to Director Bennett, he seemed open to that proposal. So if the city would like to propose that, we'd be glad to work with you on what might be an appropriate way to structure that proposal.
I would think that that would save us some traffic on Interstate 30, a lot of traffic on Interstate 30 if we could do that. What's the cost comparison for what we're talking about here, $600 million to build a South Loop route to?
I don't know. That's something that would need to be considered. Based on the last updated South Loop study that we did, it was going to be built as a parkway. We'd acquire the right-of-way for 4 lanes, median divided and access controlled. Only at major arterials would you have direct access to the roadway. It'd probably be built from west to east because the highest demand's on the west, and could be built as a 2-lane road, and then as demand increased could be built, the additional 2 lanes could be built in the future. So I'm sure somebody would want to run the numbers on that, and you'd want to offer up taking the state highways that are in the best condition to minimize your long-term exposure if you wanted to pursue that.
Okay. All right.
We can ask our staff to look at that, and if there's no objection, we can begin to at least explore that as an option for us to consider in the future. So, Bruce, if you would.
Is it timely enough to consider it as an alternative to what we're talking about with the I-30 crossing?
I have no idea what impact that might have on this process.
I do think that it's timely to begin discussion on it because, as Casey mentioned, the department's in the process of doing a study on the I-30 corridor from Benton all the way up to the South Terminal. And included in it would be how to treat the 430-30 interchange where the South Loop is planned to go on there. So now is not too soon to begin discussion with them on on that possibility if you're interested in it.
Okay, the 600 million that we've talked about, is that strictly for the proposal that's on the table for the expansion of I-30 through downtown Little Rock, the bridge, and through North Little Rock? That does not take into account the potential for any additional lanes on 630, 30, or the North Little Rock loop?
Right now, I think that budget is focused just on the 30 corridor between the north terminal and the south terminal.
And it sounds like they're...
And to try to get as much of that built for the money available as they possibly can.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Director Wyrick. Director Webb, you're recognized, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Jim and Casey, for the information. Kind of follow up one of Director Wright's and Director Wyrick's questions. You know, we've talked about this 600 million, and I was at
Director Webb, if you pull your microphone closer to you, please.
was at a meeting in late November with a group from Ward 3, and we were told that there was going to be a $150 million gap. You mentioned $100 to $150 million gap that we will pay back. The contractor's going to front this money, and we're going to pay this money back out of future money that's going to come in, so we will not be able to do other projects based on your experiences in your years at MetroPlan. Like, how long does it take to pay back that kind of money?
I'm not sure. I think the department is planning on paying it back over 4 or 5 years of future revenue. Now, there's some uncertainty here from our standpoint. It's where's that money being paid back from? We have an assumed allocation of funding that's funding at the discretion of the Highway Department about where to spend it in the state. They give us a funding mark for our 20-year plan. So that's the budget number that we operate in. If they bring money from outside Central Arkansas into Central Arkansas to pay that money back, it's not going to impact any of our projects. It will impact projects in other parts of the state, and the commissioners representing other parts of the state may have some say about where that money comes from. That's why it's important for us to know where's the money coming from, and does that impact our future projects and future plans directly, or does it impact widening project on Highway 82 in South Arkansas, for example.
Okay, thank you. And as a follow-up, I mean, it seems like most people agree that the bridge has some safety issues that need to be addressed, and that that we need to do some upgrades and safety upgrades with the ramps. But there's been some conversation out there that if we don't follow the plan as presented, then we're going to lose this money, and it's not going to be spent in Central Arkansas. Again, based on your experiences as being in MetroPlan, with MetroPlan for many, many years, just what would you say the odds of something like that happening would be?
Powerball odds, something like that. I mean, I think there's not a time frame on the CAP funding. It doesn't expire like some of the federal funds do. There were political promises made from the Highway Commission about where the money was going to be spent. Even if you just replace the bridge and rebuild the corridor, I think you could spend the better part of $600 million doing that, and certainly the bridge needs to be replaced, and the safety issues on the corridor need to be addressed. That doesn't mean that the Highway Commission is bound by the constitutional amendment that the people passed, because there wasn't a list of projects in there. And they're a constitutionally independent agency and have the authority to do what they want to. I think they would think twice about moving it out of Central Arkansas, or even out of that corridor. But that's just my personal opinion. I don't have any insight into their deliberations.
I guess one more. When you talked about the two philosophies and, building our way out of congestion, which then as you went through multiple additional slides, didn't really seem to be something that would be feasible. And I remember a few years ago, Pew came to Arkansas and said if we didn't do something differently at the state level, by 2020, all of the general revenue that we had would go to corrections. It wasn't all the general revenue, but we would have to significantly lower the money we spent on education and everything else because of the increase that we would need to have for correction. So if we tried to build our way out by increasing the lanes and all these other choke points that we now know about, would every penny just about probably have to be spent on transportation at the expense of all the other general revenue needs that we have?
Yeah, you can build, if you have enough money, you can build your way out of congestion, okay, for a long time, but not for forever, because if you have a growing economy, it'll catch up to you. But let me give you some scale about what it would take in this metropolitan area to build our way out of congestion just on the metropolitan freeway system. Talking about $4.5 billion of future revenues. That would be taking the next 10-year half-cent sales tax statewide, and the next one after that, and using 100% of all of that money on Central Arkansas freeways, assuming we could get everybody else in the state to vote for 20 years of half-cent sales tax to build our freeways for us.
So 20 years, 100%, $4.5 billion.
About that. Maybe it'll take a little more than that.
Thank you.
It's a lot of money.
Director Webb, was that your final question?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Director Richardson, you're recognized, please.
Thank you, Mayor. Jim and Casey, thank you for your presentation. I think it certainly covers a lot of interesting information. I think you answered a lot of questions. I think you also raised a lot of questions. And in fact, your presentation, especially the closing part, it was certainly the impetus for Director Webb and I coming up with the resolution to stop and take some time and study so we can have you and your board look at what the Highway Department is proposing, see if that works in concert with what Central Arkansas, Imagine Central Arkansas plan over the next 20 years, and make sure that it's working in concert with what you're planning, not in conflict, and make sure we're all singing from the same hymnal. And for those of you who misinterpreted the resolution and the intent of it, wasn't a yay or nay vote. It was simply to say, let's step back, take some time, let's get the input of other folks who are looking at the growth and development of our community of Central Arkansas. And I'm not going to pose any more questions. I think your presentation warrants a lot of questions, and that was the reason why we sponsored a resolution to say, let's step back, take some time, and get some more input for some of our local experts here to make sure that we're all singing from the same hymnal. And I want to thank you guys for your informative, wonderful presentation.
Thank you.
Our next person is, let me recognize Vice Mayor Lance Hines.
Jim, thanks for your presentation. I'd have to take a little umbrage with you with your definition of vicious and virtuous cycles. Sounds like the difference between Friedman's definition of economics and a Keynesian definition of economics, and with your virtuous cycle being more of a Keynesian view of how things should be.
Yeah, they both won the Nobel Prize.
That's true.
Yeah.
Uncle Milty and I happen to be good friends from college, so as a joke, as my economics professors would say. Just going into your Imagine Central Arkansas with the 6-lane cap that was put on, how many of the people that signed that 6-lane policy back in 1995 are still on the Metro Plan Board today?
I don't know. We update our, probably not many, we update our plan every 5 years. So it was adopted in 95, reaffirmed in 2000, reaffirmed in 2005, reaffirmed in 2010. Before we finalized the draft of Imagine Central Arkansas in the winter of last year, we asked the Metro Plan Board to reaffirm that policy or not, because it would make a big difference in how we drafted the plan. They reaffirmed the policy then and reaffirmed it in December of 2015 when they adopted Imagine Central Arkansas.
Okay. Well, I can tell you the answer is 0. There's none of the original members from that board are still on Metro Plan. Why did Metro Plan give a waiver on the I-630 project with the Big Rock interchange, widening it from Baptist to University?
Well, the analysis was done. The Big Rock interchange, frankly, wouldn't have worked unless you provided that amount of room for all of the weaving to take place to get down to the 6 lanes or 8 lanes that go on through town. And so once you approve the Big Rock interchange, then incumbent upon that was approving the exception to the policy, but only to University Avenue.
Right. Would you say that the I-30, the 30 crossing corridor is similar in many ways, where you've got the confluence of, probably actually more, you've got the confluence of more interstate systems, more weaving, more, would you say it's similar as far as being more of an interchange instead of a radial interstate?
Yeah, in my opinion, it has some unique qualities, and an argument can be made that because of all of those system interchanges and all the merging and weaving, that an exception should be considered to the policy for that corridor.
So getting back to, because I work out in that corridor and I commute from West Little Rock, and I can tell you that the Big Rock interchange has been very good, but it'll continue to get better once because right now you've got 6 lanes merging down to 3, and you get a lot of, albeit for maybe 5 or 6 minutes in the morning, and depending on what time you go through there.
It gets a little dicey with some of those mergers right now.
And I deal with, my office is on Roosevelt. So what's the biggest factor on making those improvements in the 30 crossing? I mean, what is it? Is it more safety? Is it mitigating congestion, moving it out for safety, moving that congestion out of that corridor to where maybe you get bottlenecks where there's not so much traffic, or?
Not sure I quite understand the question.
In that corridor, what would be the major benefit of widening that corridor to allow for all of that merging and interchanging? Because one of the things we saw from the highway department is the number of accidents along that corridor are higher than you see any other place in the state, I think, in their system.
Yeah.
So would that be the major reason for supporting?
Yeah, I think safety is a significant issue, and some of that has to do with merges and weaves. One of the things that's being dealt with in the NEPA process, and we're anxious to see the results, is once you increase speeds and solve some of the merging and weaving problems, then the accidents that do occur are likely to be more severe because you're going faster. Lower speed accidents tend to cause body damage to cars and not necessarily to people. So the net analysis of speed and increased severity versus low speed and less severity, and how that balances out will be interesting to see. Now, as I mentioned, a lot of those safety issues could be addressed, I think, without necessarily widening the road, not all of them. But if you deal with the North Terminal interchange and that weave there, you deal with the weave at 67 and 40, and you can do that without doing anything to this corridor. You close the interchanges, you extend the ramps like are planned in either the 8 or 10 lane. You add shoulders to the bridge. A lot of that can go a long way in dealing with some of those safety issues. And the other thing, and I think honestly, regardless of which cross-section you choose, the main thing that's going to improve safety in that corridor and any other corridor in the future is going to be autonomous vehicles, and they're going to negotiate with each other for space on the roadway and make space and deal with each other as the weave. So a lot of those weaving crashes that we're seeing now are going to disappear as technology improves from 2020 to
So
2040.
you're telling me that's a fact, that'll happen?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm just curious, that's a pretty big crystal ball.
Take my word for that one.
I can tell you, human nature has a lot to do with it, and
Yeah.
the fact that people would give up control of their cars to let them drive around, it's, I don't know, it goes against some of the grains of human nature and giving up control. Getting back to the 6-lane project, you talk about once we build out the 6-lane, then we need to address our regional arterial network. How do you know that improving our regional arterial network is going to take enough traffic off the interstates to do a significant decrease that we know we can keep our existing interstate at 6 lanes?
Yeah.
How do you know that will work?
It will not eliminate congestion. Once you have congestion in a growing metropolitan area, you're never going to get away from congestion at peak because of the factors that I've mentioned. But because you have an alternative way to get there, it gives people a different choice. And so maybe your peak congestion is not as long, not as severe, and people have alternative ways of getting to where they need to go. It's like a grid system versus just one major arterial. You can look at West Little Rock, for example, where the grid system is not built out partly because of topography, partly because of decisions not to build some of your collector streets. All the traffic then is forced onto one single roadway, which is Cantrell Road, and that's never going to be uncongested.
Have you guys modeled this arterial network in detail?
We have it on a model, yeah.
What modeling did you guys use to do that?
Casey's the one to address that, the regional transportation model that we operate in conjunction with the Highway Department.
Okay. That's all the questions I got for now.
And thank you, Vice Mayor Hines. Director Campiris, you're recognized, please.
Jim, I have to tell you, this is like a movie that I once saw where you had two movies going on simultaneously, and it all was based on whether the girl got on the subway or missed the subway, and you ran two stories simultaneously going through there. And you listen to the Highway Department, and I listen to you, and I really think that we're talking about two different places, and I'm not sure which one's right. Secondly, I have gotten some calls and emails from friends who have thought that my position in questioning this is to undermine downtown and what's going on. And it's a little funny that I've spent 20 years of my life trying to make Little Rock get better. So let me ask you some hard questions that I think need to be answered. And this is not to try to do anything, but try to get us all on the same page of how we solve this mystery, because I don't think that there is a right answer that we've come to yet. First of all, you've sponsored two studies that have said you need 10 lanes going through Little Rock. One was, and I've spent more time reading this stuff than I ever want to do again, but that's okay. One was adopted it was not adopted in 2003 by the Lewis Berger Group, that came to the conclusion that 10 lanes was what you needed to do. And y'all paid for that study along with the Highway Department. And the second one was a congestion management process that was, I'm not sure who prepared it, but the suggestions were widen I-30 to 10 lanes from I-440 to I-40. This requires an MPO policy recommendation. Can you give me some insight on how and why you've got two studies that say do it and then you didn't do it?
Yeah, I'd be glad to. The 2003 Regional Arterial Network, Regional Freeway Study was a two-phase study. First phase was paid for by MetroPlan. The second phase was paid for by the Highway Department. The Highway Department selected the engineer and managed the study. The first phase focused on the River Bridge. In particular, we were considering at the time whether building a bridge at the old Midtown Freeway location, Pike Avenue extended to Cantrell Road, would have any significant benefits, and if it would impact the other bridges. And then the Highway Department in Phase 2 looked at the overall freeway system. The recommendation coming out from the study was that the most cost-beneficial approach was to first build the Midtown Bridge, second, to widen the Interstate 30 bridge to 8 lanes. Third was to rehabilitate the Broadway Bridge in that order. And then over the long term, past the 2025 design period, to look at the possibility of widening the I-30 bridge to 10 lanes. Now, that was a consultant's study. Those were consultant recommendations. The report was neither adopted by the Highway Commission nor the MetroPlan Board of Directors, so it was never adopted as policy. We're required under federal regulation to run a congestion management system and to measure congestion throughout the metropolitan transportation system and to write reports on that. And we do that. The second thing that you quoted was from our congestion management report. I can't remember which one. It did talk about all of the recommendations from different studies that we had done in the past, and noted that those recommendations were not MetroPlan Board policy. MetroPlan Board policy is reflected in that policy statement on roadway design that I just read you. The consultant's report did not change the mind of the MetroPlan Board relative to that policy that they've adopted first in '95 and reiterated as recently as 2015.
But they did vote on it, or they just didn't take an action?
They took no action on it.
I mean, why not?
It was a report to the board. It was providing information to the board and Federal Highway Administration.
So, I mean, they just said yes or no? They didn't say yes or no, they just said nothing?
Sometimes your able staff will provide you a report on a policy matter. You may choose to take it up. You may choose to thank them for their effort and use that information as you see fit. You may choose to say nothing at all.
The second thing that when you look at your plan, you asked to build out 10 different areas. Is that correct? The arterial network, regional arterial network.
I'm not sure
So
what the 10 different areas.
The Image Central Arkansas document is to build out the freeway system to 6 lanes.
Yes.
And then the second thing is build a robust regional arterial network.
Yes.
So I've looked at the 12 areas that you want to build out, and I've looked at the different areas. The first one is State Highway 107 in Sherwood to North Little Rock Main Street. Right?
The regional arterial network is, I think, an 830-mile regional network.
But this is in your plan. This is number one.
I'm not sure to which you are referring, sir.
Right here. This is your regional arterial network study prepared by MetroPlan and Renaissance Planning Group in coordination with Grisham Smith and Partners. So I presume this is the way you're going to build this out.
Once again, I don't have in front of me what you have in front of you, so I can't respond to you.
Well, it goes through,
But when you say build this out, let me just say that the regional arterial network, 830-mile network, we've identified priority corridors and critical segments. For those critical segments that are state highways, we've tried to prioritize those in terms of need and congestion. The way they get built out is when the owning organization, the sponsoring organization, is ready to move on them and has the funds to move on them, and in some cases, the local
Yes, sir,
or
but
state match to
but-
move forward on them.
but the first one on your list is State Highway 107 in Sherwood to North Main Street, North Little Rock. The price on that is $21,800,000. This is y'all's numbers. I mean, I'm not. The second one is University Drive to Chico in Saline County. It's $41.5 million. Now, I think it's great to build these out, but the two questions that I think are pertinent are, if this is what you're proposing, who's paying for it, and what's the percent of traffic it takes off the interstate system? I mean, I think that's a valid question of, if you're proposing a plan to do this, how are you going to do it and who's going to pay for it? And, we're barely able to start taking care of our $500 million worth of interstate needs in the city. So I'm not sure who's going to pay for these things in order to make your system work. And the next question is, over what period of time are these going to be built out before you come back and decide that you need to expand the interstate? I mean, you present the plan and you say this is what it's going to be. You list 10 or 12 roads that you want to do, but you don't say how you're going to pay for it, who's going to pay for it, over what period of time you're going to pay for it, and what happens to the interstate while you're doing it. I mean, these are honest questions that I think need to be answered as I read this.
Okay.
So, I mean, these are your numbers, not, these are your reports that I have spent, unfortunately, my weekend reading. The third one is, the third part of your plan, which I think is laudable and wonderful, is build out light rail and bus. Can you elaborate on that, and what your thoughts are on that?
Yeah, the transit plan calls for improving existing fixed route service to the extent you can and can afford. Then moving up to branded routes, more frequent route service. And then as the region approaches 1 million people, which we estimate to be around 2050, because it's about that time in population that regions can then afford, for example, light rail or a dedicated busway for bus rapid transit to provide premium regional service, which would mean going out to Conway, to Cabot, to Benton, and providing express service into the job centers in the metropolitan area.
Well, again, your study, this study right here, Conway to Little Rock Express Bus Feasibility Study. And again, I think these are laudable ideas, but someone's going to pay for them. And I'm not sure that I'm going to stand up and say we're going to propose another tax to do this. The startup cost to do this is $218,000 to $267,000. The annual fare box revenue is a third of that, $90,000 to $130,000, and the cost of maintenance, the cost of maintenance won't even be covered by any of this. So again, who's going to pay for these? I mean, my criticism, or what I need for you to tell me, and I may need to sit down with you and Casey and say, how do you do this? But these all sound great, but someone's got to pay for this. And who's going to pay for doing this?
Yeah, Director Pierce, that is the seminal question for all of this. Based on our work on the Blue Ribbon Committee on Highway Finance and the Governor's Working Group, the State Highway Department needs an increase in funding to build what they have promised on the state highway system of an additional $2 billion a year. Now, who's going to pay for that?
Well-
It's not there. It's not there with the state highway system. It's not there for your local road budget. Based on the budget that I showed you earlier, we only cover 3/4 of our maintenance needs for the next 20 years with all of the money that we have. So that is a fundamental question that the Congress refuses to address, our General Assembly refuses to address, and if nobody pays for it, nothing gets done.
Right, and I agree with that, and I agree with the conundrum, but my problem is that your plan says, build out the highway things to 6 lanes, and then do all these 12 things on here. I've given you $60 million on 2 of them that I've looked up, and basically, your estimate is it takes 3% of traffic off the road. It the route to Conway takes 75 people off the road if you built the bus right now. So I think these are all great ideas, but what are we going to do between now and 2050 to take care of these problems? I mean, I look at this as a great idea. I love bikes. I love rapid transit, but who's going to pay for it? We're not Portland. We don't have that population density. Jimmy Moses and Rhett Tucker would love to have the subsidies that we saw in Portland. We don't have it, but we can't make people do anything. You induce people because it's a great place to come downtown, and that's what I believe in. But I don't know if you remember. I know you were at the. Well, let me just do one other thing. I think that. Again, looking at these things, your choke point philosophy of what happens, there's a graft of yours again that I think Casey did. And obviously I've got too much paper. What? It's an individual piece of paper I found. No, it's a different one. It's Casey's. Basically, what it shows is that if you leave it at 6 lanes, you talk about choke points, and when you build it out, if you look at Casey's graph, and I'm a little confused here tonight, it's okay. Right here. You had it. Okay, here we go. Here is your graph. You recognize it, Casey?
Mm-hmm. To the extent that I can see it from here with my cataracts.
Come on over here. We can look at it together.
Look vaguely familiar, yes, sir.
What it basically says is that you go from, you alluded to that you wanted a C or D, right, on movement, or C, what the level of movement through there.
The Highway Department's standard for urban freeways is level of service D.
Okay.
That's their policy right
So
now.
if you look at no build out, this is your map. In 2040, what you have is a big red line right through the center of Little Rock. And you then you continue having a choke point in 2 places in North Little Rock and 1 going towards Benton and Bryant. Your map. You then go down to the the 10-lane alternative, what, you want?
I was trying to see your map.
Oh. What you then look at is you go down and you look at the 10-lane build out, and you now are at an E, which is going through there, and the choke points that are all gone except for one in North Little Rock, and the area that you said slows down does slow down, but you're still going at peak times to your area of town 40 to 60 miles an hour. So it is slower than it is through the middle, but you've eliminated all of those different things. Now, here's my point, and I don't know, you were at the Presidential Library when the people, probably our largest employer downtown, came and talked about the two things that really impressed me at that meeting was Linda Chesterfield, who got up and said, I represent people from little towns all over southwest Little Rock and the county, and they hate what's going on because they have to work in the city. They have to drive in. It's not safe. They can't get there, and you're not doing anything about it. So the people from Stevens came up there and they said, okay, our people are complaining all the time about we can't get into town. And here are the numbers. They have approximately 750 employees. This doesn't count the Capitol Hotel. 85 drive from Saline, Pine Bluff, Hot Springs, 130 from Jacksonville, Cabot, 145 from Mayfield, Valonia, Conway. Less than 100 people if you take a really big geographic area of downtown, which almost goes to the Heights, it's 100 people. So their problem is, and what they're worried is how do you get people in and out of town? And my worry is that what you need to convince me in the next week is that your plan, how are you going to fund it, how are you going to do it, and how can you be saying to people that this is the acceptable plan on how to do something when there's no funding mechanism here? You tell me the cost of it, but you're basically saying don't build anything bigger until you do something. Now, I don't know what the right answer is, Jim, but I do know after getting a real headache from reading all these things, that all the lanes that you want to fix have a 1 to 2 to 3%, and most of them are build sidewalks, do signalization, and do things like that. And they're all laudable goals, and I would love to see every one of them done. But the biggest issue is, to me, how do I, and this is absolutely an absolutely selfish thing on my part, how do I take 25 years of my life and not see it thrown away by making the wrong decision? So I am real concerned about this, and I don't know what the right answer is. But until you can tell me how this plan works, I can't support your plan. I mean, you say do it, don't build anything else out until you do these other 12 or 15 roads to disperse traffic, but there's nothing in there that says how you do it, and to me, there's nothing that says what that takes off the interstate. So those are the issues that you need to figure out in the next week to convince me before I can vote for Kathy's and your resolution.
Okay. Let me try to address a couple of the things that you raised, and I would be glad to meet with you at your convenience for as long as you like in the next week to try to allay some of your concerns. One, I heard Senator Chesterfield. She was quite eloquent. I think her constituents would be best served by a South Loop roadway and some north-south arterials other than improving I-30. In terms of Stevens employees, what if all you do is build this corridor, unless the Stevens employees live either in the Fush Bottoms or at McCain Mall, their trip to work is not going to get any faster or only marginally faster because they're still going through the choke points from Cabot and Benton and Conway that are made worse by dumping traffic out to those choke points without having the funds to
Jim,
widen the
I'm
whole
not sure
system.
that your own map says that. I mean, that's not what Casey's map says as I read it.
I would be glad to sit down with you side by
And
side.
I would love to. I'd love
so
to
that
because
we're
that's
looking at
not
the
what it
same
says.
thing and addressing the same issue. In terms of the last 25 years of your life, unfortunately, I think you may be under the assumption that traffic congestion on the Downtown River Bridge means that downtown will slowly die. I think I heard somebody predict that. So I said, okay, well, let's look at a comparable city and see if, in fact, that law holds true. Let's look at, maybe not Dallas, let's look at Austin, Texas. In 1960, the Little Rock metropolitan area was larger than the Austin, Texas metropolitan area. By 1980, Austin has edged ahead of us a little bit. I-35 that goes through downtown Austin is 6 lanes. Happens to be the 10th most congested bottleneck of any highway in the country. Since 1980, Austin is now the 11th largest city in the country. It had the city population of 9 million people, the metro population of 2 million people, and according to the congestion kills downtown rule, downtown Austin should be long dead by now.
Well, but Jim, that all, I agree with everything you said, but there is a lot of economic drive that people put up with. But go to Montgomery, Alabama, and look at what they did when they did their interstate, and it killed their downtown.
And so I think that.
So the right answer is you got to do it right. And all I want you to do is tell me how your plan works, how you pay for it, and how many years it takes to do it. And those are honest questions that someone needs to be saying. It all sounds good to say, do this, but if you can't pay for it and you can't do it in a timely fashion and you don't let anything else be built because you've got talking about a chokehold, you've got the chokehold. It's a mother may I system. Mother may I do something different. And you know, it is there's all sorts of chokeholds in this, and you're one of them. You've got the system where you can say, we passed the rule, they're only going to have 6 lanes, and I'm going to enforce that until, you know.
Until my bosses, the policymakers, tell me to do something different. That's correct.
I think that you don't give yourself enough credit for the power that you have.
Well, I wish that were true.
Well, I hope
but
that.
Again, Dr. Campuris, I'd be glad to sit down with you for as long as you want.
Love to.
Okay, very good. Vice Mayor Hines, you're recognized.
Jim, one last question. On your Imagine Central Arkansas plan, how many public meetings did you guys have, and where did you have them?
Director, that is probably documented on the Imagine Central Arkansas website. We did months and months of public outreach. We worked with the Boys and Girls Clubs. We went to public events all over the metropolitan area. We had public hearings. We had online. We did social media. It was significant, and we kept a tout of all the comments that we got. And so all that's on record and online, and you can look that up if you're curious.
All right, thank you.
Director Richardson, you're recognized, please.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Dr. Dean, Director Webb's and our resolution doesn't necessarily say adopt any particular plan. It just says take some time and get input from all the impacted individuals, those who are experts. And it doesn't necessarily say yay or nay to Imagine Central Arkansas. It doesn't say yay or nay to the plan by the Highway Department. What I found interesting, Jim, about your presentation, because we're always talking about economic development in our community and how do we continue that conceptual framework and make it a reality. When Scott did his presentation to us over at the library, and I posed a question to him whether or not this was based on best practices and research, and he said, what are you talking about? I said, well, what kind of economic impact? He said it was going to have a positive economic impact, not a deleterious economic impact. But listening to your presentation, especially your chain of impacts, widening is going to have a negative impact from an economic standpoint in our community. Is that not correct? Did I hear you wrong in your presentation?
I have not done a detailed system-wide economic analysis. I think some of the economic benefits claimed in the Pell is an overreach. If it would eliminate all the congestion in the system, then it might be justifiable. But in fact, it may make some of those congestion points worse unless additional millions of dollars are invested to deal with those subsequent choke points.
You remember the slide I'm talking about where you had the layered, tiered level of economic impact? And it has an impact on businesses, growth, rooftops? So you haven't done a detailed analysis of that?
Yeah. Now, if you've got congestion in one corridor, then people will make locational choices. I mean, the public are pretty flexible and pretty dynamic, not only in changing the time of going to work, changing where they live. A friend of mine who works for Federal Highway raised his kids in Cabot to go to the Cabot school system. They graduated. The congestion is bad in that direction, so he moved back to Pulaski County to North Little Rock to avoid the congestion. Businesses can do the same thing. The important thing, and I think if you look at the Metro Little Rock Alliance and from an economic development standpoint, the important thing from our metropolitan economy is that those jobs locate in central Arkansas. Dell was founded in a dorm room at the University of Texas, but its corporate headquarters are in Round Rock. It still benefits the Austin metropolitan area, for example.
Well, just one more point, Mayor, for those in the audience and the millions watching on TV. And Dean, once again, our resolution does not say yay or nay to any particular plan. It just says do what we're doing tonight, to have these robust conversations, these interchanges, and get some more input and dialogue before we move forward any particular plan, which is the impetus for us coming up with this resolution, because we thought the highway department jumping out as fast as they did wasn't the right approach.
Jim, I think one of the things that might be beneficial for the board is to explain a little bit more how the money that Congress provides to us and comes to the state and comes to you as it relates to certain improvements that MetroPlan votes on as part of our regional arterial network actually get done, and where that money comes from. It doesn't, and I know that in many instances it's partnerships that have been developed where part of it's federal funding, part of it's which flows through the state, part of it comes from direct funding to the MPO, and part of it comes from partnerships where cities also belly up some of the money to partner with the state in other parts. And I don't think anybody's got a very good grasp of that right now, and I think that would be helpful.
Okay, the federal funding comes down to the states based on a national allocation formula, and it flows into different funding categories. A large funding category used to be the Surface Transportation Program. Has changed, I think, under the new law to the Surface Transportation Block Grant Program. Metropolitan areas over 200,000 get a direct sub-allocation based on their share of urbanized area population. So that money comes in, and for us it's about $10 million a year, comes into the MetroPlan Board to use to implement our plan. And for example, we have used that money to build the rail grade separations around the region that we have promised in Metro 2020 and Metro 2025. Our Springs rail grade separation, the South Loop rail grade separation that was just dedicated not too long ago, are all part of that planning process and funded through the funds that come down through the MPO. All of those are 80/20 funds. The state then gets a pot of money of what's left. Some of that has got to go to areas under 5,000 in population, and the rest of it they can spend throughout the state, and then they allocate that with the advice of their 5 highway commissioners for projects around the state as they see fit. All of that requires, all of the federal funding pretty uniformly requires an 80/20 local match. Now, the Highway Department has a partnering program Like I said, they have more needs than they have money to shake a stick at. So if you want to partner with them 50-50 on a project, then your project can magically go higher up on the priority list, because then they can leverage their small amount of funds in a broader area.
Very good, thank you. Director Adcock, you're recognized, please.
Thank you, Mr. McKenzie. But I would like for you to, instead of having a private meeting with Director Campiris, since this has been on television to all the public, I would like for you to come back to this board and respond in public so everyone can hear the answers for Mr. Campiris's question, because I'm very interested in them.
Be glad to do that.
Okay, thank you.
So if you're going to meet with Dr. Dean, let's make sure we follow back up with whatever those questions and dialogue are on this.
Yeah, I
issue,
think
the
I'm a
Regional
little
Arterial
unclear
Network.
in what he was asking, and perhaps sitting down side by side and going through that. At least we can define the questions clearly, and then I can come back and provide the answers in a public forum.
I just want them answered for the public as well as
Yes,
Dr.
ma'am.
Campiris.
Be glad to.
Vice Mayor Hines, you're recognized.
Jim, this is kind of how long have you been the executive director of MetroPlan?
27 and a half
So
years.
since predating 1995.
Since the beginning of time, it seems.
Okay. Well, and this kind of a unique situation that, based on your intro and your vision, which I disagree with your vision of the way things should work. I'm a free market guy. We should compete. There shouldn't be any central command trying to influence people's decisions on how they should behave and what they should do. The one constant through MetroPlan is you, and it really looks like your vision of how you see the region, not really the ones that have come over you. One of the benefits of being a bureaucrat and having a long tenure. It's what we have here, and like we talked about, is who do you believe? And I'm not a big advocate of smart growth. You talked about the tiers, and some people would call sprawl an ugly thing. I call sprawl growth. A thriving metropolitan area is going to grow, and having connectivity and mobility and the ability to get from one place to another easily. The funny thing I think you talk about managing congestion. What about mitigating congestion? And you would prefer to have the central core congested severely by your own numbers, by your own studies, than to possibly look at a solution that maybe does mitigate that congestion and alleviates it in the central core and does push it out a little bit further. But to me, as a Little Rock resident, to benefit the central core at the, I kind of look at it as a heart, and you kind of look at your arterials as the veins, and I look at the interstates as the arteries, and with the central core being the heart. If you get congestion in the heart, and Dr. Dean can tell you, it kills the patient. And, I just think it's a little short-sighted. I don't see how the solution for fixing all the arterial networks, it doesn't give you enough capacity to even account for the growth to get to 1 million people. And, I think that's where we're dying. I'm not as well-learned and well-schooled as you as a planner. I'm just a simple business guy that lives out in West Little Rock, and I drive 35,000 miles a year. It's what I do for a living. I'm in sales. So I have a pretty good firsthand knowledge of our system, but that's kind of the way I look at it. It's who do you believe? Do I believe you and the MetroPlan board, who you've been pretty much the single architect of the plan for the last 30 so years, or a highway department has a very diverse highway commission with very independent thinking? Like you said, constitutionally they're autonomous. It's kind of who do you believe? I've seen Big Rock Interchange since its influence. It's been a pretty good project. The folks in West Little Rock think it's been a great thing. So, it comes down to me. I believe the highway department over your view of things, and that's where I'll be. I think, going back to Director Richardson, I think our plan This resolution's a little premature. We're still in the middle of the process. I don't see the need for it to take action. Let's let the process continue on until we get some final recommendations. I mean, like Jim said, they hold the linchpin, I guess you could say, in that the highway department has to come ask their grace on widening this corridor to 8 or 10 lanes or whatever the final solution comes up being. But with that being said, I'll end my comments. Thank you.
Mayor, if I may respond to a couple of things. One, I appreciate you guys bestowing all of this power on me. It feels pretty good, actually. Our job is to reach out to the public and ask them what they want the region to be. And ever since I've been director, we've been very aggressive at doing that. Now, the public that we go out and talk to may have a different view from the public that comes to a project-specific public hearing like on the 30 crossing. And frankly, if you surveyed every man, woman, and child, they probably don't care what happens with Imagine Central Arkansas or the 30 crossing. What they want is paved roads with no congestion, and they don't want to pay for it. And that's the honest-to-God conundrum that we're faced in trying to provide public infrastructure. Now, as a free market economist, you'll know that public goods are free. The use of them, like roadways, is free unless they're a toll road. And so when you have a free commodity, you tend to get overuse. If we weren't charged for water or for electricity, then I'd run my air conditioning with my windows open and wouldn't care anything about it. And so when you have a free public good, you tend to have overuse. You can deal with that by pricing the free good, toll road, or what a lot of jurisdictions are implementing now, high occupancy toll lanes, or you can have congestion. Congestion is the price that we pay individually and as a society for overuse of that available public capacity. Or you can subsidize that overuse by raising taxes on everybody to subsidize the choices of the few people that use the roadways at the most congested times. That's what free market economics would dictate. So those are the solutions that we're faced with. We still don't have enough money. We can price it. We can deal with increased congestion. We can raise taxes a lot to mitigate the congestion.
Director Fortson, you're recognized, please.
Thank you, Mayor. And as you know, Jim, this is my second time to see your presentation. I saw it in your office, and you have some very provocative thoughts. After my first visit, I had a couple of thoughts about what things make people change their behavior, and I remember a presentation I attended about a year ago when an Arkansas economist said that $4 gasoline and the 2008 recession didn't change behavior in Arkansas because we still buy more F-50 pickups than any other kind of vehicle. So I don't know what kind of social change has to come about to make people move. But anyway, after the first presentation, you talked about the chain, and you had it in here, the chain of impacts, and which, as I understand it, has some bearing on your thinking on how things need to be approached, which, to paraphrase, and if I'm misinterpreting, tell me that if you manage congestion, perhaps the ultimate benefit might be, because of the fact that it's too much of a pain otherwise, more people and more businesses might elect to go into the central business area. And to me, I had a little trouble getting my head around that, because I think also would that not tempt the HPs of the world to say, I want to avoid that congestion, I'm going to go to the edge of the area and attract people to me. So anyway, the author of that was Dr. Walter Kulash. And so I did a little research on him. He's a consulting engineer based in Orlando, Florida, with a firm called Gattinger. And I read several of his presentations which go that way. But I cannot find any place where there's an example of a real development, where we took City X, these things happened, and this was the end result. It's all of what I read appeared to be theory. And so when you come back to us, if you can give me examples of how what he theorized actually worked, I would appreciate it. So.
Well, I can do that right now, and let me refer back to the example of Austin, Texas. A comparable region. It's got a north-south freeway runs through it. It's a very congested freeway. You've got the central business district, the entertainment district, the upscale housing, the state capitol complex on the west side of the freeway. You've got an industrial and poor and minority area on the east side of the freeway. You've got an east-west river that runs through it. The difference is Austin, of course, is on both sides of the river. Austin, for reasons unrelated to transportation access, right, has seen exponential growth. I think 158 people per day move into the Austin metropolitan area. It has, my son lives down there. He's an attorney for Dell, like I said, who are headquartered in Round Rock. He lives in Austin, not in Round Rock, because like many of his generation, they want to be near where the action is, and Austin is weird, and they're real proud of that. They keep Austin weird is a major saying down there. But he paid an outrageous sum of money for a 1940s bungalow. And the folks 2 doors down, while we were down there visiting my new grandbaby, tore a house down to build 2 housing units on one lot, because the price per square foot, the demand for living in Austin has gotten so great that people want to be there. Entertainment businesses want to be there. Entrepreneurs want to be there. Downtowns of the current age and of the future are not downtowns of the past. And in very few downtowns in this country will you see headquarters of mature companies locating in the downtown. They tend to locate in the suburban areas. What downtown's value is today is housing for young entrepreneurs, where you get that serendipitous collision of people on the street or in the bar or at lunch that spawn new ideas and hence new businesses. And Austin is a hotbed of that. The property values have gone up so much despite the outrageous congestion on I-35 and the other roadways in the city of Austin, that the property values on the bad side of the freeway, the old east side, are starting to escalate. You're seeing a redevelopment of an old Air Force base into top flight housing, retail's going over there, and the economy in downtown Austin is booming, even though the congestion is bad and getting much worse. Now, I tell my peers around the country that in Arkansas, our definition of congestion is if you can't drive 10 miles an hour above the posted speed limit in free flow congestion, it's too damn crowded and somebody should widen the roadways, but don't raise my taxes to do it. But and you will ask anybody who moves here from other places, we don't have congestion here. Now, it is going to get worse. But even in 2040, it's not going to be near what Austin is now if we do nothing. And I'm not standing here advocating that we do nothing. The Imagine Central Arkansas policy does not advocate that we do nothing. It advocates first that we have the largest freeway construction program in the state's history, I think, as Casey mentioned, except the original interstate program. It advocates spending tens of millions of dollars improving our arterial network and making some land use changes. So, that's what we're advocating, and we think we have a real-life laboratory in Austin to prove some of the things that Mr. Kulash said in his presentation.
The only point, and then this has gone on long enough, and I don't want to prolong it, other than my banker friends in Austin say what's made Austin grow is a 50,000 student university with a big research department, a booming musical industry, and a huge economic development infrastructure funded partially by the public, partially by grants. So we could debate back and forth. Did the highways do it? Did this do it?
No, and that's my point. There are other things that have caused that boom that aren't transportation related, and even despite of the massive congestion, they are still booming.
Right. My point being, we can discuss it all day, and there are no absolutes with what we're dealing with.
Right.
And Jim, if you find other examples as a follow-up, please bring them to our attention.
I think.
I think somebody mentioned Montgomery. I think Director Campiris mentioned Montgomery, which was not a good experience. And I mean, I think it's helpful for us to learn from other experiences either way. Director Webb, you're recognized, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I hadn't planned to do any follow-up, but based on some of the comments, I want to, and I'll be brief, but I think it's the highway department's job to build highways, and I have no argument with Scott or anybody else from the highway department for coming and presenting highway development. I think one thing that we know, or at least that I believe, is that we don't have the money to do Imagine Central Arkansas. We don't have the money to do everything that the highway department is proposed. But I think it has pointed out true differences in public policy opinion. And based on what Jim just said about his son in Austin and the growth that Director Fortson has talked about, we can go back and look at what's the city going to look like 50 years from now. And it's not going to be the things that I may do today that the younger generation wants. And we've got study after study and example after example from that meeting we went to in Nashville, where we had the mayors of the successful cities talking about the public policies that they have enacted that have made them successful. Green initiatives, physical design, cultural economic development, entrepreneurship. I've got the map that those mayors put up. So I think that the debate about the different public policy beliefs is healthy and it's positive for our city. And, I'm glad that you came tonight. Thank you again, and I look forward to continuing this public policy debate. It's a public policy debate. It's not about the highway department and Metro Plan. It is, what do we want our city to look like 50 years from now? Because that vote about 30 Crossing is about the next 50 years, in my opinion.
And let me reiterate that the highway department and Metro Plan staff, all of the people on our board of directors, I'm sure all of y'all, want a successful project in this corridor. It does need improvement. The question is how to do it so that it best fits the future needs of the city and the metropolitan area and the state all at the same time and in a way that is affordable. So that's, I agree, a broad, vigorous public policy discussion could only be of benefit to the project and the community.
Thank you.
Director Wyrick?
Thank you, Mayor. Jim, when I asked you the question about building the project or managing the system, the list of projects that Dean brought up from a map that I couldn't see, is that how you would propose to manage the system? Are those projects?
Well, I think, again, you've got a freeway system that is kind of in equilibrium now. So if you eliminate all of the congestion in one key link, it doesn't eliminate congestion in the rest of the system and may, in fact, have a negative impact on the rest of the system in pushing congestion to other choke points unless you do other things there. You can decide, for example, instead of building 10 lanes, maybe we build, and this is just off the top of my head, it's not something I'm proposing, maybe we build 8 lanes, maybe we retain some congestion in this regulating valve of a corridor, and to meter congestion, then the traffic out onto your street system in a way that could absorb it and onto the other links of the system in a way that doesn't cause them to break down. That's just speculation on my part. The highway department's in the process of doing additional modeling on the 8-line alternative, but that kind of balance of congestion without trying to spend billions and billions and billions of dollars in what I think is ultimately a futile effort in trying to eliminate it, try to balance it over the system is a worthwhile effort.
Okay,
And frankly, it's what many metropolitan areas that simply have run out of right-of-way and run out of money are that's what we're trying to do.
My concern after your presentation tonight is that, that we don't have the money to take care of the choke holes as you described to us, or it's not in the plan to take care of that. And who knows when we'll get the money to do that. But I'm like Dean, I don't know what the best plan is, but, you know, I'd like to have the information to determine what the best plan is. But so many times our citizens get caught with not having the accesses that they need. And so I just want to make sure that, you know, we look at all of the aspects of your presentation as well as what the Highway Department says. And I do appreciate you coming. I do believe you have a lot of power. I really do.
Well, thank you. I've got my Superman cape on.
I
under
know,
my
I
suit.
saw it. Thank you.
Having served on that MetroPlan board, I will tell you there are no shrinking violets on that board. Notwithstanding his tenure as the director, I have dealt with many of them. Some of them you all know, and I will tell you that there's some strong opinions that are expressed, and there were strong opinions expressed as it relates to the Big Rock interchange back then too. Ultimately, those decisions were made, but it was not made because of a recommendation from Mr. McKenzie. It was made based on the debate and the dialogue and the discussion that occurred. So just want to let you all know that he's not quite as powerful as you might think he is. All right, Director Adcock, you're recognized.
Yes, it was stated a moment ago that our people want everything. They want streets, they want highways, they want roads, but they don't want to pay for them. And I really take offense at that because, you know, we asked the taxpayers to pass the infrastructure tax, and they did. We asked, as a state, we asked for highway money, and the people passed it. They did. So I don't think they're out here wanting us to give them everything without them paying. I think they want us to sit up here and to make the best decisions in spending that money and the wisest way to spend it, and then let them know that's what we're doing.
I apologize, Director Eckhart. That was an overstatement on my part. I think what we see nationally and what we've seen locally is if you go to the people and ask them for a blank check, you tend to get resistance. But for a specific set of infrastructure projects that they feel the need for, they've been more than willing, when asked directly, not necessarily through the state or federal legislative bodies. Unfortunately, there's a lot of resistance to funding still there. But when you ask the people directly, they responded positively more often than not.
That's why I want the discussion for this to be at this table so that the people are part of the discussion.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Director Richardson.
Thank you, Mayor. That's to echo Director Adcock's point to the tune of a broken record. That's why we sponsored this resolution, so we can get more input, spend some time deliberating this, thinking about it, coming up with the best approach, not necessarily adopting one over the other. And I think the other part, Jim, you said we want it to be economically feasible. I think we also need to make sure it's environmentally friendly, because we are talking about the next 20, 30, 40, 50 years. We hadn't talked too much about the environment tonight, and we also know that of the impact of a lot of vehicles that it has on our environment. So we are talking about the future of our community from an environmental standpoint. And I do concur with you about the assessment of congestion, having driven to Embarcadero numerous times many years ago and living in the Bay Area for a while. The description of congestion and backup of traffic is certainly a lot different out there than it is when you get here to congestion and traffic backup. So to echo Director Wells' point too, it is a policy question, Mayor. And I'm glad you reminded us and Jim from the real seat of power, where the power comes from, and you echo that point. So I want to thank everybody for having this conversation. That's, Dean, really why we want to have this resolution, so we can take some time, think about discussing and weigh all our options as opposed to going with one option as opposed to another.
Thank you, Director Richardson. Okay, Jim, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mayor.
I don't know that you expected to be here for a couple of hours, but thank you. It's been very helpful and informative to all the board members. I know that everybody wants to make an intelligent and an honest and sincere opinion, and while those issues may vary, I do appreciate the 3C process that you mentioned: cooperative, continuous, and comprehensive. I hope we can get there as it relates to this. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. We work for y'all, and again, if you've got any further questions, please call us at Metroplan, and I'll be glad to come
Let me
back,
just suggest to the
to
board
address-
members, if you've got questions, if we could funnel them to Bruce, and then we'll make sure that we get you back to do the dialogue that has been made a point of, and make sure that the public hears our process of gathering this information.
Thank you, sir.
Okay. All right, we can move now on to the consent agenda. And I know that this is very informative for everyone else that's out here in the audience. So without objection, I will go ahead and add the M1 resolution to the consent agenda. Yes. All right. And you'll note that there's a deferral of both ordinance 19 and 20 made at the applicant's request, one till February 16th and one till March 1st. If you will now look at items 1 through 7, and tell me if you have any questions on those, or if you have anything you'd like to have held separately.
Given the number 7, Mayor,
Right.
given the fact that we just had all of this dialogue, are we still,
This has been proposed by
this is Director Webb and...
Director Webb and Director Richardson.
Okay,
And-
got you.
And this is actually, and just so everyone on the board knows, the language that you have in this resolution is a substitute for the previous resolution that was submitted. Is that correct? It's different language than the original document that I think we saw?
I mean, that's correct, but it came from Director Webb. I mean, am I not?
Right. I mean, I asked our city clerk, Susan, to pull the original resolution that was submitted, and it was different than what is in our packet for Tuesday.
Well, but I want to make sure that what's on the agenda is the correct one. There was an initial resolution, Director Webb, that you passed out, and then there was a second one that talked about about Metroplan, and that's the one that's correct.
Right, and that's what's in I just want to make sure everybody that had that original one which spoke about opposition and some other things like that is not the one that you've got before you. I think Director Richardson has alluded to the language in it in terms of asking for more study, which is distinctive from the very original resolution that was circulated. Okay, we'll hold it separately. Is there anything else on the consent agenda that you wish to have any discussion on? Vice Mayor Hines, did you have some discussion on it? Okay. Director Kazort.
I'm waiting for the planning, Mayor.
Okay, we can move on to the planning, and we've got items 8 through 15.
Mayor, I'd like a presentation on 8, 9, 11, and 12.
All right.
On item 8, let me ask Dana Carney to come forward. Dana.
Truman.
Vice Mayor Hines has asked for item 10, so let's just go ahead and take them all.
Good evening, Mayor, members of the board, Mr. Moore. I'll handle this particular item. This is a second half, if you will, of a package of amendments to the zoning ordinance from last year. This group of ordinance amendments went to the Planning Commission on November 5th, where the Planning Commission voted 11 ayes, 0 noes to recommend approval to you. I have a very brief PowerPoint that I'll walk through because there's many sections to the ordinance. This will just hit a summary of what each of them are. Subsection A is a very minor cleanup issue, correcting the definition of bed and breakfast house. The language currently contains regulatory language that really isn't appropriate for a definition. That last sentence in the definition, this activity must obtain a special use permit in the permitted districts of R1, 2, 3, and 4. Each of those zoning districts already has that requirement listed as a special use permit. It really doesn't need to be in the definition itself, and actually created some confusion with a proposed bed and breakfast that was going in an R4A zoning district, which is downtown. So again, this is just correcting what we think is an error in language in the definition. Scott, next, please. Subsection B is something new. We currently don't have any language in the sign regulations that says once you obtain a sign permit, that you actually have some reasonable length of time to put that sign up. This has led to some confusion when a sign permit is issued and they sit on the permit and sit on the permit and sit on the permit, and then another person comes in for a sign, and in fact they're blocked from the ability to put up a sign because the person that obtained the initial permit is sitting on that permit and not putting the sign up.
So currently, we have no expiration date on a sign permit?
The sign permit is good for 5 years, and then you pay a $50 renewal, and it's good for another 5 years.
Yeah, I think we need to clean that up.
What this does is say you have a reasonable length of time to put up your sign. If you don't, then your permit is voided. And I did hear from both a sign company that does on-premise signage and the largest off-premise signage company in the area, and they both have no problem with this as a change to the code. Next, please. Subsection C, again, is an amendment to the sign language. The second bullet point, you'll note it highlights adding additional language regarding something that we're seeing around town, and that's a different type of a banner that has developed over the past few years. They're called flag banners, feather flag banners, or bow flag banners. When I think of a banner, I think of something that's attached four corners, either to a building or to a face. These flag banners or bow flag banners are usually stuck out in the yard of a business. There's a single pole of some kind going up, and then the banner waves off of that. We just want to make it clear that when we're talking about banners, either not being permitted or permitted only as a special use permit, we're talking about these type of devices as well. And secondly, and this is not a real problem in town, but occasionally it pops up, we'll see the use of these inflatable devices that incorporate movement, dancing tubes. They kind of look like characters, and they're inflated, and they flap and wave and dance. We want to make it clear that those are not allowed as well. We don't allow signage that incorporates movement, and those are distracting and they're dangerous, and we want to make sure people understand they're not allowed.
They would not be allowed at all?
That's correct.
But why would we not give them the same exemption or provisions, that we would for banners?
Well, because one thing that you cannot do is you cannot have signage devices of any type that incorporate movement. That has been shown clearly to be an issue of safety and concern, and none of our signs are permitted to have either the illusion of movement or movement of the sign itself. We just don't allow that.
Well, how is that different, Dana, than, we got the slim chicken standing out on the corner with a sign and waving at people, and he's got a costume on, or she's got a costume on. How is that any different than one of those tube things?
It's not, Mayor. If the slim chicken is standing out in the public right-of-way waving a sign that says XYZ restaurant, that's violating the city sign code. He's using the public right-of-way for one thing. He's using
We got the
sign
pizza
that
man too,
incorporates- That is correct.
How do we ever regulate that?
What if they stand in their parking lot with the sign?
Huh?
The tax services, Liberty Tax Service?
Oh, there's tons of them like that.
There's.
We don't do anything to police it?
If they're standing there holding a sign, we do try to police those.
What if they're standing in their property and not on the right-of-way and the sidewalk?
In all honesty, that's not a terrible problem. It does come up at tax season for a couple of places. A couple of barbershop haircutting places use that kind of thing. If they're using signage and they're moving the sign around, we do try to tell them to stop doing that. because it is utilizing movement.
I'm going to agree. I don't think it's a big problem, and I'm not sure that these dancing tubes are any more of a problem.
Me
And,
either.
I mean, so far, everything you've gone through, I'm fine with, but I don't get this at all. And I understand that y'all are, and I know you've got more to talk about here, but, I mean, this would be one I think I'd move to delete that addition from this ordinance when we, bring it up next week.
Certainly.
What else do you have, Dana?
You're the quote, Mr. McKenzie, you're the policy makers. I'm just a 33-year bureaucrat. So,
Well, to follow up on Director Kazor, at the end of the term last term, the U.S. Supreme Court put down a real limit on signage, particularly if somebody says that the purpose of signage is expressive. And if you look into what the reason for the sign is, then it is expressive. So, the thing jumping up to sell a hamburger may be one thing. The thing jumping up to have people come to a type of program suddenly has protection. And I want to suggest maybe that 36-543 we separate out for next Tuesday and let us look at that again in light of that decision.
I'm fine with that.
Yeah, I think so too.
all right. Next, please. This, again, we view as a cleanup issue. As you're aware, we do have regulations that prohibit the parking of commercial vehicles in residential areas. And then the code goes on to list some specific commercial vehicles in case people don't understand that a dump truck is a commercial vehicle, for example. It lists them. That listing does not include mobile canteen units, which are either the trailer type or the self-contained mobile canteen units. We just want to simply add that to the list so that there's no doubt in anyone's mind you cannot bring that commercial mobile canteen unit and park it in a residential zone. Next, please. This particular item amends several sections of the code, particularly design overlay districts. In several of the design overlay districts, any variance of any standard, not just of the design overlay district, but of the underlying zoning, requires that you have to rezone the property. This became a real issue in Hillcrest, for example. Hillcrest, as you know, has a fairly extensive design overlay district that deals with Vulcan area. And it had the requirement for compliance with not just the DOD, but for the underlying zoning. Any variance from either required that you had to rezone the property. This meant if you wanted to put a fence up that was a little bit taller than what is allowed for a residential fence, not addressed at all in the design overlay district, but it is a requirement under the zoning ordinance, you had to turn around and file to rezone your property to a planned development to be able to get a fence variance. The folks in Hillcrest realized that was not a reasonable approach for something that was not specifically called for by the design overlay district. And so that DOD has been changed. All the standards of the DOD remain in place. If you want to vary anything that's specifically called out in the DOD, you have to go through the Planning Commission. But if you want a variance from something that is not DOD related, you can go to the Board of Adjustment. No sense rezoning your property for something that's not specific to the DOD. Based on that, we looked at the other design overlay districts and thought that was a reasonable approach. What we're not proposing is any change to any standard of any design overlay district. But if you want a variance from something that's not specifically called out in that DOD, you don't have to go through the process of rezoning your property. You go through the other variance process. We think it's very reasonable, it's friendly. We still get public hearings on every issue, and there's no watering down of any DOD standard. Okay. Next, please. This is to kind of bring us in line with state law. Our zoning ordinance doesn't have definition of either brewery or microbrewery or microbrewery restaurant. As you're aware, we do have several in town now, and we don't have anything in zoning that talks about them. We have sort of worked our way around them. I had a meeting with the folks at State ABC, and we wanted to bring our code into compliance with the language of the state in dealing with brewery, microbrewery restaurants, and microbreweries.
And just to segue, what about micro distilleries? Do we have one of those as well?
What's the difference?
We have a distillery. We maybe have two
a
distilleries.
distillery. We didn't see at this point as that being an issue. It's in an area that was historically industrial, and perhaps that is where it needs to stay.
Okay.
The immediate need seemed to be to try to catch up with the growing interest, particularly in microbrewery restaurants, brew pubs, and these kinds of things. And so our definition for both of those matches the new state language. Next, please. And then what this does is place them in appropriate zoning districts, recognizing that microbrewery and microbrewery restaurants are truly restaurant-type uses, make them by right in the urban use district, the commercial districts, and industrial. Conditional use in C1 and O3, which is the same place that restaurants are conditional use already today. And then amend the various zoning districts regarding breweries, make them by right in I2, and then conditional use in the other districts. And the reason being there is a fairly substantial difference in the potential production between a microbrewery and a brewery. And it is possible that someone could come in and want to do a brewery that truly would be industrial in nature. If it's not, let's take them at a case-by-case basis, do it as a conditional use in the other zoning districts. Next, please. Sections V through Y, strictly cleanup. As you're aware, we no longer have Confederate Boulevard, but the Granite Mountain Design Overlay District throughout it makes reference to Confederate Boulevard. There are standards for that design overlay district for what was once Confederate north of the railroad, Springer south of the railroad. They're two completely separate standards. What we've done is gone through this section, cleaned up, made the name changes that were necessary. Again, no change in any standard, no change in any criteria, just simply reflecting the change in street name, making the distinction as part north of the railroad, south of the railroad. And I believe this is the last one. This, in all honesty, came to us from involvement with a problem that we had throughout quite a bit of last year. This has to do with home occupations. The city zoning ordinance allows at staff level approval of home-based business. And there are a set of criteria established in the zoning ordinance. And if you meet the criteria, you get approved for a home-based business, you get a business license, and you go on your way. If you violate the provisions of the code, then we get into an enforcement issue. And it can go on and on and on. And we're dealing sometimes with folks that are just bad actors. 99.9% are perfectly fine, fit right in the neighborhood. You'd never know your neighbor was doing a business. But for the one that's a problem, we thought it would be appropriate to establish some sort of process where that home occupation could be revoked. There's not one in place currently.
Do we have anywhere in the code a definition of a home occupation or a home business?
All of that is defined in the zoning ordinance. Definition of home occupation, all the criteria that have to be met.
And do we, and I'll look at it, but I mean, does it distinguish between the type of business that would have customers or clientele coming as opposed to the type of business that would not have anybody coming?
Yes, as a matter of fact, it does not permit businesses that have customers and clientele.
What about like a piano teacher?
There are exceptions for tutoring, which would be, and it's limited to a certain number of students per day. So it does make that kind of exception, but it is very strict. And it's designed to make sure that what you're proposing to do as a home-based business is not an imposition on your neighbors.
I like it.
Last slide, please. This is the proposed revocation procedure. Again, remembering the approval is given by staff, and there is no process in place to allow for revocation. This process would allow us to issue a notice to take the person to the Planning Commission for a hearing before the City Planning Commission, where the Planning Commission could have authority to revoke the home-based business. And the appeal from the Planning Commission could be to this board. So there is an appeal process. And if the home-based business is revoked, it's an accessory use permit. It's outlined in the zoning ordinance. We thought the Planning Commission is the place to go for that hearing for revocation. If it's approved, notice of revocation is issued and the business license is revoked.
That it?
It gives us another tool, again, on that very rare basis, but it does give us a tool to work with problem people that are having a negative impact on the neighborhood.
Director Webb, do you have a question for Dana?
I do have a question.
Go ahead.
About that, thank you. If you know where there is a bad actor on this home-based business, and you know that inside the premises that there are many safety issues, like can you call for a fire marshal or something to come out there and look at the home because there is a business license and it's a business?
Director Webb, there's currently not anything in zoning that addresses that. I would have to get with other staff to see if there's a process for that to happen.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dana.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, we want a request for presentations on 9, 10, 11, and 12.
Mr. Brzezinski?
Mayor, Vice Mayor, members of the board, item 9 is a package of land use plan amendments. If you recall, several years ago, we began the process of reviewing the land use plan citywide. We started on the east side and moved across the city east to west. We went through that first cycle. Now we've gone back and started over again, so you've already seen a couple areas twice. This is the next area that is from north of 630, from the state capitol out to 430. And it's a small group, and it's really can best be defined as being cleanup items, either recognizing existing zoning or existing uses. At the Planning Commission hearing on November 5th, a couple items during the hearing process were removed. A couple areas were removed from the package, and then the Planning Commission voted to recommend approval of the package as presented at that time. Again, you'll see these packages every so often. We're starting to work on the next one this week, just the initial review.
Just to clarify for everybody, this is really not much more than cleanup and recognizing existing uses as the legitimate use.
Yes, that's
Okay.
correct.
Yeah, I see you have wards 3, 4, and 6 listed here. And in your synopsis, it says, in an effort to make the land use plan more reflective of existing and likely near future land uses, how is this going to impact? I mean, am I gonna have anybody calling me screaming that y'all trying to make my land unusable?
Director Wright, no. I mean, nobody, other than a couple people at the Planning Commission, we didn't hear from anybody. As you can see from the board communication, we give notice to any neighborhood associations within the area. You have, I mean, just for example, this one on West Markham, west of John Barrow Road. It's an existing commercial development, the one that's highlighted in the blue. That currently is on the plan as residential low density. Well, it's not. It's a commercial.
What is that right
That's
now?
where Chips Barbecue is located and several other.
Ace Hardware.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So again, it's showing that as mixed use. And then to the west of that, again, a non-residential development that's shown as residential low density. The appropriate land use classification is suburban office.
Okay.
So, and this, again, as we've stated throughout does not change the zoning of the property. It's just the land use category.
Okay, I got you.
That's it on 9.
All right, how about 10? Who asked for 10?
I asked for
Go ahead, Vice Mayor Hines, or go ahead, Tony.
Vice Mayor Hines, Mayor, members of the board. Item 10 is a proposed amendment to the master street plan for a section of Canis Road. This part of Canis is outside the city limits, but within our zoning jurisdiction, or extraterritorial jurisdiction. It's, I think, about a 2-mile section. I might be a little off, from Chenal Downs out to Walnut Grove. Canis Road it is shown on the master street plan as a minor arterial with 90-foot right-of-way. However, which typically the current standard is a 5-lane with approximately 59 feet of pavement. In 2001, this section of Canis, the cross-section was reduced from the standard at that time, which was 4 lanes, to 2 11-foot lanes with 4-foot shoulders. The idea being then to try to maintain the rural character of this part of Canis. It's got a very nice tree canopy, and that was the idea, to protect that, but primarily the rural character. The request before you is to further reduce that standard by amending the master street plan to 2 10.5-foot lanes with no shoulders at all. Just basically recognize the roadway that's there for the most part. Staff is not in support of the further reduction of the standard. We think the shoulders are needed. The county position is the same, the 2 travel lanes with shoulders. There was a lot of discussion at the Planning Commission meeting. Ultimately, the Planning Commission voted 4 ayes and 4 noes to recommend approval of this proposed amendment to the master street plan.
Or do you mean 7?
7 ayes.
7,
Yeah, 7 ayes and
what did I say?
4 and 4.
4 and 4.
I don't have the power anymore.
Tony, the proposal is basically to recognize it as it is now. Given the current standard that's on the books, who would be responsible for developing this road to that standard, and under what circumstances?
Director Kazort, as development occurs, it'd be the responsibility of the property owner. The boundary street ordinance would kick in.
And right now, I assume that everything on this street is pretty much residential, if anything?
That's the zoning for the area. It's R2 for the most. There's some AF, agriculture, forestry, just a
I
very.
don't see any structures on this picture, so is there any development on this road at all? No, I get a no from the back, okay.
Just Chenal Downs.
Okay. All right, thank you.
So where would, so this designation would start at, so basically, it would go west of Chenal Downs?
To Walnut Grove, Vice Mayor.
Okay.
That section.
What's the genesis for this? I think I know what it is, but I want to hear if it came up at the Planning Commission.
Protect the tree canopy and the significance of what's referred to as Fletcher Hollow.
Correct. So what's the current that it's been reduced to?
The current is 2 11-foot travel lanes with 4-foot shoulders
No
on each side.
sidewalks? No sidewalks? Correct.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
I'm sorry about the vote counts, but
Okay, item 11.
Item 11, no, 11, yeah, I'm sorry. Item 11 is property located at 1300 North Shackelford. It's at where Breckenridge intersects Shackelford. For a number of years, this property was used as a church. It's been vacant for a number of years. The request is to rezone the property to a planned development to allow a printing and graphic design business. The property is shown on the land use plan as office. It's adjacent to office zoning on the west side and also to the north. And staff is recommending approval, and the Planning Commission also voted 10 ayes, 0 noes, and 1 absent to recommend approval.
Tony, what is there right now?
It's a vacant church. That's its past history.
Okay. And is everything, looks like west of here, is that all residential, or is that some office or commercial, or?
To the west, Director
Yes.
Resort, that's all non-residential.
Non-residential?
Yes.
Okay.
The residential is
It's all
to the
east
south.
and south?
Yes, sir.
So this would be if that was a quadrant, this would be in the quadrant that is all non-residential right now?
Yes.
Okay.
Except when you get closer to Rodney Parham on the east side, that's
Right.
where Kmart is and some other commercial developments.
Okay, thank you. Then 12.
Item 12 is property located on Cantrell Road, Highway 10 in the 15,000 block. The request is to rezone the site from R2 single family to planned office development for a new medical clinic on the property. The plan does show the site for suburban office, so the proposed zoning is compatible with the plan. Staff is recommending approval, and then Planning Commission recommended approval. The proposed development does comply with the Highway 10 Design Overlay District. There are no issues there. And it was on the consent agenda at the Planning Commission.
All right.
Does that handle?
That's all of my requests, Mayor.
All right. Are there any, we can turn the page and
One to keep separate, I would, what was the one that,
we'll hold item 8 separately.
well, and 10, since staff's recommending denial on that, hold that
And 10.
separate.
All
And
right.
item 8, well, I'm already making that change. Tom is going to make that change, so that won't be part of the
Okay, so he's going
ordinance.
to pull that,
All
that
right.
second. But I would say leave 10 separate, Mayor, since staff's recommending denial there.
Very good.
Brad, you got another one, 15?
Oh, I did for 15, so if anybody wants 13 or 14, then I'll ask him for about 15.
15?
15.
Item 15, it's property located at 3800 Woodland Heights. If we could get the zoning map up, thank you, This is in the vicinity of Easter seals. Let's see. Is that, can we get the zoning map up? That's the land use, which, but, okay, that's the zoning. Thank you, Scott. If you look at the zoning map, the request is to rezone this, the last remaining R2 piece on the west side of Woodland Heights, north of Pleasant Forest, from R2 to O3. This particular property is surrounded on three sides by O3 general office zoning and then also across Woodland Heights. Staff is recommending approval, and the Planning Commission recommended approval on the consent agenda of the O3 general office zoning.
And what's it currently being used as?
Just single-family residence.
Okay, so it is a residence right now?
I don't know if it's, I'll have to check that.
Yeah, would you let me
directly.
know if it's occupied or not? I don't think I have any objections to it, but I would like to know if that's an occupied residence.
Okay, anything else on that item? If not, then we have some public hearings. One's a municipal property owners improvement district, and we've got a couple of utility easement abandonments. And that does it for our agenda, other than a question about whether we're going to do a financial report tonight.
Next Tuesday.
That'd be great.
Very good.
I don't think I could stand anymore about overloaded.
Okay, if there's nothing else, thank you all very much for being in attendance.